All right. For the 14th time in franchise history, the Knicks, they're a 50-win ball club. Wasn't easy. Today wasn't easy. I thought it would be a little bit easier, but I should know better. Um, this team doesn't necessarily make it easy, but it was fun to watch for sure. So, 14th time, as I mentioned, in franchise history to get to the 50-win plateau. They're going to be the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. It's the first time since the 12-13 season that they got to 50 wins. And I just think that number matters. I think it matters based on the ups and the downs. We've talked about the roller coaster of this season. 29-17 was the record when Randall and Anunoby got hurt in January the 27th. And the team figured out a way to go 21-15 in the next 36 games to get to the 50-win mark. So many big picture things I want to get to. So many smaller picture things regarding this game. But I think we need to, as a collective fan base, as you know, for many of us, me included, have been watching this team for many, many years now. 50 wins and the number 2 seed based on what we thought the team was going to be. And that changed. And that's part of the roller coaster. It changed many times throughout the year in terms of the early season ball club, the team after the trade, the team that ran roughshod over the NBA in January, the team with all the injuries, and then the team that's figured out a way now with some health and with some clarity regarding Julius Randle. And I think that matters, and I want to get to that in a little bit. I think they now are at a place where things are coming together. And I know, look, I don't know what was going on with the turnovers today. I thought the Bulls themselves, I mean, look, a lot of that's Alex Caruso. What do you have, 5 or 6 steals on the night, on the afternoon? He was incredibly aggressive. The Bulls made timely shot after timely shot. Credit to them. They have a lot of good shot makers, and their shot makers made some plays down the stretch and throughout this ball game to make this tough. I mean, the Knicks were able to pull this one out, but credit to the Bulls. They're going to be obviously in the playoffs. They'll be in the 9-10 matchup against the Hawks. It's a good team. It's a team that gives the Knicks some trouble. I thought Caruso, yes, Brunson ended up scoring a lot of points, but clearly he put his will and his grit, his imprint onto this game. But you step back for a second, and I talked about 21-15 since the Randall injury, and of course Anunoby going out, and then the extended absence for him. That is such, and the way they do it, and the evolution started almost immediately in terms of like how they were going to go about their business. But as the season moved along, and as Jalen Brunson got more comfortable, he got more comfortable with being the focus of the offense. And now he's gotten to the point where if you're putting 2 on the ball, the Knicks are going to get a good shot. They're not going to make them all, but they are going to get a good shot. And now you have a spacing situation that is going to make putting 2 on the ball much tougher. I think Josh Hart has gotten more comfortable as the outlet pass to make plays. Obviously, Hartenstein has been fantastic in that role, taking advantage of some of those 4-on-3s that Jalen Brunson is creating. But that evolution as the season has moved along here in terms of how they're operating offensively is a testament to the IQ, the collective IQ of this ball club, and to the head coach and the coaching staff for trying to figure out a way to help this offense produce a top 10 level of production, despite the fact there is one elite playmaker, ball handler, scorer on this team. That's Jalen Brunson, and a lot of good players. But when you have a guy like Jalen Brunson, the Knicks within a season, and that to me speaks to the absolute high IQ of this ball club to be able to adjust in season with limited practice and figure out a way around Jalen Brunson to create a legitimately excellent offense. And this is going to be a bear of a team in the playoffs. And I know there is, I saw it on Twitter and the KFS chat, like there was a legitimate argument. And it's valid, and I understand it regarding where did you want the Knicks to be? Did you want them to lose this game and go down to 3-6 and play Indiana, as opposed to what happened, which is the 2 seed, and now you're playing the winner of the Heat and the 76ers. And I completely understand that sentiment. If you are basing it strictly on the opponent, I think that is the absolute right way of going about this, because I don't think you can make a great argument that in terms of the first round matchup, at least, that the Knicks would be better off in the 2 based on playing the Heat or the 76ers with the possibility of either getting, the boogeyman in the Miami Heat or one of the top 15 offensive players the game's ever seen, and guy having a per minute basis one of the greatest scoring seasons in the history of the NBA, and Joel Embiid. So I completely understand that. With that said, I wanted 50. I wanted number 2. I wanted 50 wins, and I wanted that number 2 seed. And there was no doubt in my mind that Tibbs and this team, that they were not going to go for that. Tibbs talked about playing through the finish line, and that's exactly what they did tonight. I don't know how many minutes DiVincenzo ended up finishing with, but it was over 50 for the first time in his career. Credit to him for continually, and listen, this is for a guy like him who's moving without the ball and completely blowing things up on the defensive end, off the ball in terms of his ability as a rotation player, and just getting in there, getting steals. Like, it's a hard 50 minutes for him. So credit to him for obviously being there. I guess we should talk about, what we saw today, just to sort of put a bow on, because this is the last regular season game. And I was thinking the other day of how enjoyable this season has been, and just watching these games. And I talked about where this team started, where they are right now, and how fun that's been as someone who's like really like dives into the X's and O's and like trying to figure out like how this team's going to, without Randall, figure out a way to be a good offense, and watching them do it. It's been a complete joy. And I enjoy regular season basketball. And while, I obviously watch every playoff game, I don't necessarily think I enjoy them in terms of the stress and the agita and the type of, ball the Knicks play. I mean, things are tight. Things can get a little, as they did today with the late game turnovers. Like the Knicks don't play a type of basketball that's going to provide a lot of stress-free moments. And I am completely setting the expectations that I'm going to be stressed out more times than not in the playoffs. But you obviously want those games. But I thought this regular season game, I'm going to try to enjoy it because, with the stakes being obviously lower, and you just are just watching your favorite team you've been rooting for many years. It's a fun thing. So I do want to like give the game its due, which is, the Knicks pulling out a victory, a late game victory, an overtime victory against the Bulls. And I do want to shout out a couple of players that may get lost in the talk today. I thought Bojan Bogdanovic in the fourth quarter made 6 incredibly big points. That one pull-up 3 that got them, I don't know if it tied the game or got them within a bucket or two, completely huge. I thought his minutes in the fourth quarter were big. I don't necessarily think the Knicks win the game or get to overtime without those points in that moment. And I thought the other guy that I do want to just make mention of, so Hartenstein gets to the 30-minute mark before the overtime starts. So the Knicks pull him because he's still going to be at that minutes threshold. They're not going to want to push him beyond that. So Achua starts the overtime. Now, I don't know what the deal with Mitchell Robinson was or is necessarily. I think this probably, and we'll maybe get some clarity. And Kev, I know you're producing the festivities today. So just let me know if there's any Robinson injury stuff, or this is strictly a matchup thing, which is sort of where my head is at right now regarding the Bulls going very small without Vucevic in the game, and maybe not the right matchup for Robinson. And obviously you want to keep him away from Vucevic has given him problems since for years now. So it could have been just a matchup situation regarding Achua playing more the backup 5 in the second half. But I thought Achua in the overtime period, he had 2 stops at the rim, had the putback, and that, listen, DeRozan is going to make that shot at the end more times than not, probably. But if you watch that game, I mean, how many times did the Knicks reach in and get a foul call when DeRozan or Kobe White would go to their like low pickup where you're trying to extend the ball low? try to get a reach in and an N1. Well, Chua, I thought, did a great job of just keeping his hands high. They always say, show your hands. So you want the referee to know you are not trying to dig down. I thought he did a good job of keeping DeRozan off the line in that moment and try to make him make a shot over the top. DeRozan missed the shot again, completely makeable look, a shot he makes, as I said, probably more times than not. But I thought Chua not getting called for that foul was massive there, and his minutes were obviously very important to help the Knicks pull this one out. The big story, of course, and listen, this is like this in most games where the Knicks are going to play and the Knicks are going to win. They're going to do it behind Jalen Brunson, who again got to the 40-point mark. It was not the most efficient performance, although he did 40 points on 30 shots. Didn't start great. He really had a lot of trouble finishing in the paint against the Bulls early in this game. Turned that around. Only made 1 3, but got to the line 12 times, made 11 of them. 13 of 26 from 2-point range. Again, the turnovers had 4 of them, which is uncharacteristic for him. Of course, that is many more than we're accustomed to him having. But again, you got to sometimes credit the defense. And I thought the Bulls, in most of the occasions, sort of forced the Knicks into these turnovers. Obviously, the Josh Hart turnover late in the game, where he was, the Knicks had the lead and he was trying to kick it out to DiVincenzo in the right corners. It looked like he kind of lost the hand on the ball, turned it over. So obviously the turnovers were a big issue for the Knicks. But, and we talk about the word inevitability with Jalen Brunson, and I don't know if there's any other better way to define it, to the point where he's scoring 40. And it kind of feels just like a ho-hum performance for him. And it kind of has been over the past several weeks. If you look at his, the per game averages and just what he's able to do on a night-to-night basis. An absolute monster offensively. He is, I think, it just seems like the narrative is getting to the point where I think he's probably a favorite to be first team All-NBA. He's got to get many votes in the MVP. Maybe he finishes 5th or 4th, depending on where, the votes go. But he has just had one of the great regular seasons in the history of the New York Knicks franchise. One of the, there's probably going to be, you're only going to come up with several other seasons offensively where you can look at the Knicks history and think a guy outperformed Jalen Brunson in terms of what Jalen's done this season. Of course, as I mentioned, kind of start this program, so much of it done without Julius Randle, who, let's not forget, was able to produce a lot of easier offense for Jalen, especially in the catch and shoot department, where Randle obviously has the gravity, the post-up ability, and has gotten really good at spraying the ball out. And one of Brunson's great skills is his ability to relocate along the 3-point line. So you lose that. So you lose some of the easy offense. And there was a point in, as the Knicks in like February were trying to figure it out, there was a point where it was, at least for me, I was worried that we were going to see either Jalen go to a point where he's going to, start struggling in the efficiency department or wear down a little bit. And again, credit to the Knicks for operating in a way where you're adding more elements to their offense in season. Again, it is very rare for a team to have the evolution offensively in terms of their, the X's and O's, the strategy, the things you're trying to operate, as drastically as the Knicks have changed from where they were to begin the year. And you change a little bit when you make the trade. That's going to change things. And then you have the injuries, and you have to completely almost not start from scratch, but you're having to figure out a way to add elements to make offense easier, because you don't have the built-in gravitational force that Julius Randle is. So you have to figure out a way to sort of make that manufacture offense based on that. And it seemed like every game the Knicks would add a little bit. It was a Pacer game early when the Knicks had just the injuries that just happened. We're only talking about a couple of weeks after the injuries, and the first plays Brunson running a floppy action where, it's an action I had not seen Jalen Brunson or any Knick really run in the Tibbs era, and they start the game with that to get Brunson to his left hand. He finishes. Actually, it might have been against the Grizzlies sort of early on, if I can remember the play correctly. But it was an early indication that the team was going to start expanding where this offense was going to try to generate points from. And then you have the Hartenstein, part to this, and you can't talk about Jalen Brunson's performance as a player and not sort of link him, in my mind, to Hartenstein, because I don't think Jalen is going to, he's as good as he is. He's going to score. He's going to perform. He's going to put up points. But I think he needed someone to make things easier for him. And it was the I think the Hartenstein pairing, to where you now have a guy to where if they put two on the ball, that ball's going to now either go to the outlet, which is going to be typically Josh Hart to try to make a play, or it's going to go to the short roll, and that's Hartenstein to try to make a play with an advantage. And, remember the Laker game early on when the Knicks didn't have, obviously it was Achua playing the power forward. You had the Lakers were easily set up to sort of take away Brunson by putting two on the ball late in that game. The Knicks didn't have an answer based on the lack of shooting, based on the fact they really hadn't developed an opportunity to really take advantage of that in the two-man game. But that is completely changed now. Now the Knicks can consistently get good offense if the teams are going to put two on the ball, to the point where I don't know if it's a sound strategy. And I think with Brunson, you're going to have to, if you're trying to think of this, like, how do you defend him? I think varying coverages is probably your best way. But to me, I think he's gotten to the point where putting two on the ball, and the Knicks ancillary pieces have gotten to the point where if they put two on the ball, he's going to make the quick pass, get the ball out, and now you can play with an advantage. And that's the thing that Tibbs has always talked about. It's not just trusting the pass, which is something that, that is a tenet of this head coach. But I think the other part of it is like, trust the pass, but do it quickly, because the quicker you can get that ball out, then the defense is going to be in rotation. You're going to keep them there. And then at that point, you're just getting to the paint and you're trying to win the closeout game, which I thought the Knicks did pretty well in this game, based on, how the Bulls were covering Brunson. A lot of it was just Caruso trying to battle his way. A lot of it was putting two on the ball, and the Knicks, I thought, did a good job of making the Bulls pay. And that's just been a big thing, and something the Knicks are going to have to continue as teams are going to try to figure out how to play Brunson. Now, we are going to, I'm sure, get a lot of questions based on the potential matchup against the 76ers or the Heat. Listen, we're going to have a while to sort of dissect the potential matchup between the one of those two ball clubs. But I think both of them are obviously going to present problems on their on either side of the ball. They're good teams. They're well coached. It's going to be a battle regardless. I think the Knicks, and I thought the Pacers were going to give the Knicks problems. I think the Knicks are a worthy number 2 seed, but I think there is not a huge gap between 2 and the 8th seed in this conference. I think the Knicks should be favored, obviously, in the first round and potentially in the second round, until they get to the hopefully they get to the Celtics or whomever they play in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks deserve to be favored in those series, but I do not think that the Knicks are going to go in there as overwhelming favorites. I think every one of these teams, maybe Hawks and Bulls, put them aside here for a minute, despite the Bulls playing the Knicks really well today. I think every other one of these teams, including the Magic, depending, obviously that would be things would have to go completely sideways for the Knicks to play the Magic in the playoffs. But I think that every one of these teams, especially the Heat and the 76ers, they have ways to sort of make things hard for the Knicks. Before we sort of move on to some of the out of town scoreboards and get to some of these games, which, NBA did a great job of getting the Eastern Conference in the 1:00 bracket. And then you have the 3:30 West games tipping off here. It was April 4th that we got the news that Julius Randle was going to miss the season. And I'm sure, maybe the players knew things were not looking good as we headed into that date before we got the official news on that. But I think, to me, that was an important part of this season, because I think if you're the Knicks and you're assuming that that Julius Randle is going to come back here, I think it's hard not to sort of, I don't know. Listen, I don't think it's a preparation thing. I think you, as a coaching staff, as a team, you're always looking over your shoulder. Like, is this the day that Julius ramps it up and he gets to the point where he's going to come back, and you can sort of make it seem in your head that you're going to get Julius Randle back, and how much is he going to change things? Obviously, he would change things drastically. There's so many things that you would have to change and revert back to if Julius Randle was going to return. But we got that tweet that he was not going to come back. The Knicks went 5-1 since that, or 6-1. Kev, you want to look that up for me? I think it's 5-1. But it might be 6-1 since the Randall news. Let me get that I can probably pull that up here. But I think it's like an important part of the season, because I think the team needed that clarity that they weren't going to get Julius Randle back, and it was so they beat the Kings, they lose to the Bulls, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins after that. So 6-1 after the Julius Randle news that he was going to miss the rest of the season. And I don't think it's coincidental the team went 6-1 since that injury news and that clarity. I think it's an important part of this season. We all wanted Julius to come back. I think most of us did. I think if you're a unbiased basketball fan of this team, I think you can admit, even if you're not the biggest Julius Randle fan, that the ceiling of this team is probably a little bit higher if Randle was going to come back. But the fact that it was clear that he wasn't, I think that probably crystallized things for this team, and for a coaching staff that can maybe hone in on what this team is doing, knowing that they're not going to have to figure out a way to get Julius back into the mix before the playoffs, and the adjustment that would present itself. So I think it's an important part here that we got the clarity on Julius. It wasn't the news we all wanted, but I think it was important for this team prior to the playoffs, with a couple of weeks before the playoffs, to get that news and then go 6-1 since then and beat good teams, beat the Bucks, beat the Celtics, obviously. And the Bulls are, a playing team here that you beat. And I think that's 6-1 to get to 21-15 after the injuries, to get to 50 wins, and to get to the number 2 seed. I think it was important to do it. I get the argument that they were better off at the 3-6. I think the Pacers do a lot of things that can make life very hard for the Knicks, and I wasn't loving that matchup either. But now you get your home court into the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that matters. I think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal to get to 50 wins. It's the first time, as I mentioned, since 12-13. They were the number 2 seed that year. So it's been a while. 14th time in their franchise history to get to 50 wins. There was a point in the 90s where 50 wins was your floor. And that was, I know a lot of you watching or listening, you weren't around, you weren't alive, you don't remember those years, but there was an expectation in the 90s that they were going to win 50 plus games, get a 2 or a 3 seed, and compete for an Eastern Conference Finals, potentially get to the finals every single year. That obviously has not been the case for years now, but I think I can confidently say that with this group, with this superstar and this head coach and the synergy with the front office, I think this team is set up for a run here where the expectation should be 50 wins for the next 2-3 years. Potentially pushing past that if you could figure out a way to improve this team. But I think the floor, if no other changes are made, with who they have leading this ball club and Jalen Brunson, the floor should be 50 wins. And I think there's a potential here to go back to the expectations of those 90s teams led by Patrick Ewing, where 50 wins was the floor, was the expectation. And winning rounds in the playoffs and trying to compete for a championship year after year was the expectation. And I think that this team, this franchise, is pushing themselves into a category here where I think you can expect that over this next several years as this core hopefully can stay together. So with that, we had a big out of town scoreboards that we were all paying attention to. This out of town scoreboard is presented by T Squared Social on 42nd Street, just a block away from Grand Central Terminal. I lived on 42nd between 8th and 9th for many years. So right by my old stomping grounds in the heart of Manhattan. There's several levels, cool sports leagues, and all the fun your friends and family can have. T Squared Social is a new kind of dining and entertainment experience driven by Tiger and Timberlake, the T's of T Squared Social. And if you go there and you say that KFS sent you, get a free draft beer on T Squared for your first beer, and visit tsquaredsocial.com to learn more. So as I mentioned, every game in the East, all the playoff matchups, all the playoff relevant games, with the Knicks going overtime, made it a little bit easier to sort of come on here live and have things crystallized. The Hornets beat the Cavs. We'll start there, 120-110. Obviously locked in on the Knicks, didn't pay much attention to the comings and goings in that one, but it did seem like the Cavs benched their stars, or the stars that did play, Garland, Mobley, in the fourth quarter, despite the fact that there was a chance for them to jump to the number 2 with the Bucks losing. So the Cavs, they're going to be the 4 seed, and they lose to the Hornets 120-110. The 76ers, they beat the Nets 107-86. Your 76ers, as we are all well aware now, they're going to be in the 7 spot. The Pacers put up 157 against the Hawks, 157-115. The Pacers now going to be your 6. The Heat win 118-103 against the Raptors. The Heat are going to be your 8. So it's the Heat and the 76ers in the matchup to play the Knicks. The winner plays the Knicks. And then the Magic, they beat the Bucks 113-82. Magic going to be the number 5, the Bucks number 3, because your New York Knicks are going to be the number 2 seed. And I think it's important to sit with that a little bit. I don't know what I had in terms of the over-under. I don't remember where I had the Knicks. I think I had them in the 4-5 matchup in the preseason predictions. Completely different team. It's almost irrelevant to sort of go back to what you thought of this Knicks team with RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. Remember those guys and that team, which feels like several years ago. RJ with the big start to the year and the ups and downs, then the trade and the emotion wrapped around that. And then January, I mean, it's like that month itself. And you go through there and you are playing like the best team in the NBA. And then you have the injuries and you, as I have talked about, the evolution to try to figure out a way and manufacture offense. And you go 21-15, you figure out a way to scratch and claw to 50 wins. And the number 2 seed, it's going to go down as one of my favorite regular seasons that I can ever remember being a fan of this ball club. Roller coasters are, they're enjoyable for a lot of people. For some people, they're not. You want to get off the ride as soon as it starts because it's just too much. But I think if you have the heart for it, this team is going to provide a lot of pride and enjoyment. And I think pride is probably, if I'm going to come up with a word to describe this regular season, this 50-win number 2 seed in the playoffs season, prideful is probably the word that makes the most relevant sense to me, because I don't remember a time. You probably have to go back to those 90s teams that I've talked about, right? I can have this level of pride in a product that every single day is going to make you proud that you're a fan of them. And it starts with the head coach who, he's who knows about the extension and how long with, as he's on the older side in terms of head coaches, how long is he going to be here? How long does he have to move his way up the ranks in coaching wins in Knicks history? But he's the one that set the expectation the day he came on board, set the expectation about defending and rebounding and trusting the pass. Talked about turnovers a lot that first press conference. So they failed that today. But despite today, low turnovers is a hallmark of this ball club. And the preparation, the team is always prepared. It starts with Tibbs. It starts with him. It's no secret that it's one of the things that if you play under him, you always talk about, all of his former players talk about his preparation. his work ethic, and that the Knicks have figured out a way to bring players that are going to sort of okay. So Tibbs, we have thanks, Kev. Tibbs says Mitch was unavailable on medical recommendation via Steve Popper on Twitter. So I do remember him on the bench through most of the game. Maybe that's a good sign. Now, I don't know if that is an injury management thing or if something came up during today's game that prompted the Knicks to hold him out for medical reasons. So maybe Kev, if we get more clarity on that, just throw that in the chat. Thank you for making mention of the Mitch news. So obviously not a great sign. Now, I didn't see anything in this game that was alarming. There was was a moment or two in the Knicks last game where Mitch sort of came down, and this has happened now several times since he's come back, where he's got a limp or his gait's off slightly, and he's clearly favoring something in his left foot, left ankle area. Was asked about it by Fred Katz after the last game, and Mitch told him it was basically nothing going on there, just a conditioning thing. But I think if you watched Mitch the last several games, there's been like one or two moments a game where it just doesn't look right, and usually it's after jumping or coming down, trying to get an offensive rebound. So we'll try to get more clarity on that for you all before we wrap up here regarding the Mitch news. Again, if you're the Knicks and you have, and I'm trying to think of the timeline here, was the Bucks game in doubt at that point when they decided to hold Mitch out? Because I'm thinking if you're going to try to play it safe with Mitch and something's just not right, and the 3 seed is your floor, maybe they decided just to not push it there. I don't know that. Just sort of guessing in terms of like what their situation, with Mitch was, but they need him. They need him big time to be a force off the bench, despite Achua's minutes today. There's just times where his size is a big limitation, and I think offensively, while Achua is a good offensive rebounder, he is Mitch is. I'm not saying anything that you guys all don't know. He is one of the game's elite offensive rebounders and one of the best offensive rebounders in the history of the game on in terms of a percentage basis. So he is a dominant offensive rebounder. His defense, as Tibbs said the other night, he makes plays that other players can't make. He is an important part of this second unit. So hopefully whatever is happening here, there is enough time between today and when the Knicks kick off their first round matchup against either the Heat or the 76ers, that he can figure out a way to get himself into better shape. Because the Knicks if they're going to reach their ceiling, they're going to need him. I thought okay. So Kev puts in Chris Persianen deemed precautionary regarding Mitch. So thank you, Chris, for the color on that situation. So it looks like whatever the decision was for Mitchell Robinson regarding a medical recommendation to not play, precautionary. So that's good news on that front, because as I've just touched on, a big piece to this bench unit that doesn't have a ton of depth here. So they're going to need every one of their bench pieces to perform at a high level. Again, Bojan, the minutes in the fourth quarter, the 6 points that he ended up scoring, big momentum changing buckets. He is just gonna, and a lot of people have talked about, if you're not going to write him off and you think he could still help this team, there's going to be moments in the playoffs where the Knicks are going to be in the doldrums offensively, and he's going to make a couple of shots like he did today. That's going to juice this offense. And I didn't think on the defensive end, there's a couple plays that he was picked on, but I thought he held up well defensively in this game. But offensively, he is a dynamite shooter who can do it from multiple angles and spots on the court, and is going to be an important part of this team. And of course, Deuce had some nice moments, despite not a ton of minutes. I thought the first half, I do want to mention this, there was a couple of plays where the ball pressure did get to Deuce a little bit, and the Knicks really couldn't get into a set. It's been a problem this year. Not something they're going to correct in terms of Deuce on the ball reps, but maybe playing with Hart and DiVincenzo, they can move some of those non-Brunson minutes to one of those two guys in terms of initiating offense in the 5 or 6 minutes that they're going to need when Jalen Brunson is not going to be playing, because we know it's going to be Jalen Brunson averaging close to 40 minutes in the playoffs if the Knicks are going to make a big run here. So this was a fitting way to end the regular season, where you just had to grind it out. It was not a easy 50-win season, but it's a prideful one. There's been, only 14 of them in the history of the franchise. So you take 50 wins, you take the number 2 seed, and you'd be proud of this team for getting there, despite so many reasons for them to say, yeah, we just don't have enough. We don't. And the coach isn't going to let them think that. And we know their superstar is not going to let them think that, because whenever you have Jalen Brunson on the court, you have a chance. And to me, that is like, if you want to think of one moment or one thing of this season that you're going to take away this regular season, is that the Knicks have a guy where there's going to be 5 or 6 players in the league better than him. So most times when the Knicks take the floor, they're going to have the best player, and they're going to have the best player depending on who wins the Heat 76er playoffs play-in. I think you can make an argument based on where Joel Embiid is health-wise. I think if they play the Heat, the Knicks will have the best player. I think Embiid should scare anyone if they could beat the Heat, but I don't know if he's at necessarily his peak conditioning, peak health. So we'll see. But Jalen Brunson is going to be the next several years of his Knicks career. Hopefully they extend him and it's 5, 6, 7 years and he retires the Knicks. He's at a point now where he's going to give them a chance to get to this 50-win mark year after year, because he is that damn good. So with that, the Out of Town scoreboard wrapped up and everything sort of in line here in the Eastern Conference. I think we can get to some super chats. This is a big one. I think there's a reason to celebrate and be thankful and really appreciate what this team was able to do this year, because 50 wins in a season that started where it did and had all the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, really, really impressive. And I can't wait to discuss it with all of you. So Kev, if you have the first super chat, it's Robert W. Cross leading us off here. Bring on Philly or bring on Miami. We are stomping their ass. Learn to compete, people. Listen, I get it. I get all the reasons why you want to play the Pacers. I understand it. There's a lack of playoff experience. You can even argue maybe there's in terms of like how the Pacers play, maybe that doesn't quite carry over. I'm not a believer that in that necessarily. I think the Pacers are going to give teams problems in the playoffs with their offense, at least. Now, how they're going to defend is another question. But listen, if you want to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and you want to play Boston, you want to give them a run for their money and make them sweat. And if things break right, like get to a 6 or 7 game series against the Celtics, you should not be afraid of the 76ers or the Miami Heat for that matter. I get the reasons why you are afraid of, maybe if you're not even afraid, if you're worried or concerned about either one of those matchups, because for different reasons, they present a lot of anxiety for a Knicks fan. I think the Heat it's obvious, right? They win last year. They have the Knicks and the Heat it doesn't seem like any series these two teams play other than maybe some of the LeBron years where it's clear there's a dominant team and it's going to be a stress-free series. These teams play tough, physical, aggressive, close, stressful minutes. Excuse me. And if the Knicks play the Heat, I have no doubt that is going to be what we're going to get. The Heat do things defensively or did things defensively last time they played the Knicks that made life very hard for Jalen Brunson. They were showing help early. They were really taking away some of his sight lines. Hayward Highsmith is a wonderful on-ball defender who gives Jalen Brunson some problems. The Heat, they won the last time these two teams played. I'm pulling up the box score just to get the Jalen Brunson line in that game. 5 of 18, 20 points. Did get to the line 10 times, but made life hard on him. So you know that there's going to be some things that Spoelstra is going to do that's going to make life a little challenging for Jalen Brunson. Now, that being said, he probably tried things last year when Jalen Brunson was unguardable for most of that series. So that's going to be an interesting battle. I think that the Heat, though, defensively, I think they might have a little more to go for in terms of strictly on the Jalen Brunson matchup than compared to last year. So on that specific point, I think there is reason to be a little bit concerned regarding the Heat potential matchup. And then the 76ers, I mean, I talked about the Embiid thing. And clearly, if he is close to peak form, look, he was having one of the best offensive seasons in the history of the NBA. Like, the guy is just, he's going to have and John's talked about this, he's going to have a playoff series where he's going to average 35 and he's going to get them to the finals. He's that good on both ends if he's healthy. Now, offensively, there's just the last time the Knicks played, when they had Anunoby and Embiid played, it was in Philadelphia in January, and the Knicks they destroyed them. It was and Embiid did not play well in that game. And Hartenstein, if you can remember, like, did enough offensively and really made things hard on Embiid on the defensive end by scoring and making and not allowing Embiid to gain any sort of advantage by resting on that end or trying to get his win back. Like, Hartenstein attacked Embiid in that matchup in January and made things hard, and the Knicks won going away. Now, if you watch that game, and I did a couple of weeks ago to sort of start the preparation for where the Knicks could be in the playoffs, Embiid missed a lot of shots from that elbow range that he's just going to make, and the Knicks contested late. They kept their hands away from, they kept their hands out of the cookie jar, so they didn't reach in. So it was Embiid just missing foul line jumpers, which if he makes, there just isn't much you can do. So that always worries me when you have an offensive player that is as good as Joel Embiid, that could take whatever you're doing defensively, and if he's just playing well, it's just not going to matter what you're doing on the defensive end. And that's a real concern if they play the Knicks. But the other part is, and you saw this with White today, getting downhill and having an easy time getting to the basket. I do worry about where the Knicks are defensively against smaller, quick guards, because listen, when you made the trade for Bojan and Burks, you knew you were giving up your best defensive player against smaller guards and Quentin Grimes. And that, to me, is going to be presented as a major issue in a potential 76er matchup, because as elite as Anunoby is on the defensive end, I have never loved him against smaller guards. I think it's asking a lot of him to chase a guy like Tyrese Maxey around for 40-plus minutes. So it's probably going to be a lot of DiVincenzo and some Josh Hart, and I just don't love that matchup, because I think if you're going to, with Anunoby, you probably want him disrupting things as an off-ball player against the 76ers, who lack that dominant wing scorer. So that, to me, is, it's not as big of a concern as the Embiid factor, but Tyrese Maxey is going to be a tough cover for the Knicks team if they do end up playing them in the first round. But you should not be. Knicks are too good to be afraid of any of those ball clubs. And as Knicks fans who just saw this team win 50 games, you should have enough pride to say, yeah, we could bring on either one of them, and we're going to be favored, and Knicks should be favored in that matchup. And we have home court, and we can win either one of those series. And I think they would be tough, hard fought, close series, but I think the Knicks would win against either team. So thank you, Robert, for getting us kicked off here for this post-game show. And Alex, thank you so much for the contribution here. All right, so here we go. This is a good one. This is, to me, going to be a big theme here today. Have mixed feelings right now. Convincing myself Tibbs knows the Heat aren't good and Embiid is completely cooked, and that this team can run either team off the floor with relative ease in 4 or 5 games. Well, I think you're right to have mixed feelings. I think there's the pragmatic view of today, if I'm being honest with myself, is probably get to 3 and play the Pacers. I think that's the pragmatic view, despite not getting the home court in the second round. guaranteed in the second round. I think that's a pragmatic view. I don't know. I think Tibbs is probably just thinking win the game, to be honest with you, and that he just is not one to, as they talked about on the broadcast today, like mess with the basketball gods. It just doesn't seem like it's in his DNA. And I don't think that this team, it's in their DNA. Whatever the Cavaliers did by resting their guys in the fourth quarter, man. I don't know if that tells you something about where the Cavs are and where the Knicks are, but to me, it tells you something in terms of how these two teams from the coach on down view basketball, because you had one team in the Knicks that went into overtime, played a guy 50 minutes, and gave everything they could to pull that game out against a scrappy, tough, playoff quality Bulls team with a ton of shot makers on the court, and Alex Caruso just destroying everything you're trying to do on offense. Knicks still kept their guys there despite Hartenstein, despite Mitch having some medical issues and those guys being held back in the overtime period. And then you have the Cavaliers who rest their guys in the fourth quarter and lose to the Hornets. It tells you something. And the Cavs are going to be your 4. Knicks are on the other side of the bracket. I don't think these two teams are going to end up playing each other. But in terms of like where the Knicks are, where the Cavs are, it tells you something. You just put it that way. So I don't think Tibbs was thinking about matchups here, because he's probably thinking more along the lines of like win the game, get to number 2, get home court guaranteed for the second round. And I don't know like how much pre-scouting they've done on Embiid. I don't think Embiid has looked great since coming back, but he's looked really good, and there's potential with that he can continue to round into shape and stay healthy and not have another ailment pop up here before they end up potentially playing the Knicks as they play the playing game. But I don't think, just to speak to the last part of that super chat, I do not think this is going to be a series, I don't care who they're playing, that's going to be done with relative ease. I just have too much respect regarding the Heat and what they do, what they could take away, how crisp you have to be with your rotations against their offense. And it's obviously not a great offense, but they do things, what they do just holds up in the playoffs, and they make you get into rotation. You have to, like, they're all the ghost screening and the Duncan Robinson back screens, rip screens, all the things they do on offense, playing through Adebayo, and then the Butler factor of like whether or not he can level up again in the playoffs. Like there's going to be things they're going to do on offense that just makes it, you just have to be on. You can't let them get open threes, and you can't let them get into their flow to disrupt what you're trying to do on the defensive end. And then defensively for them, the Brunson factor, with Highsmith guarding the ball and showing help early and putting the onus on the Knicks ancillary pieces to make plays is going to be a big factor for them. They're going to figure out a way to slow the Knicks offense down enough to where these games against the Heat are going to go down to the last 5 minutes. They just are most of the time. And then the 76ers, I worry about the Maxey matchup, and I worry about Embiid, even if he's 75%, like he's good enough to get Hartenstein in foul trouble. Because that is already, like, I'm already worried about the Hartenstein reach in early in the first quarter. And then if he's in foul trouble, how much can you extend Mitch? He's, as I mentioned here, precautionary, but he didn't play in the after his first rotation early in the game because of medical recommendation. Precautionary for Chris Persianen. But we don't know how much they can extend him. Hopefully it could be if they need him to play 25, 30 to 30 plus minutes. If there's an issue with Hartenstein and foul trouble against an Embiid matchup, he can do it. And then you have the Anunoby factor, and he has guarded Embiid at times and done a decent enough job to where you don't feel like it's complete. It's a mismatch against anyone, but you feel like Anunoby can hold up pretty well against Embiid, as well as obviously any big wing in the NBA. So I don't necessarily agree with Alex that either one is going to be, or I know Alex is making the point that maybe Tibbs is viewing this. I don't think Tibbs is looking at it in this way. I think he's trying to scratch out as many wins as he can in the regular season, and he's trying to get the best seed for his team as he possibly can. And he did that today, and he pushed his guys, and we knew he'd push his guys. And I don't think his team would want it any different. Thank you, Alex. Robert Cross again. Much credit is to IYBJ. It's your boy John, Coach Tibbs, and the culture he has built. Let's go Knicks. Thank you, Kev, for spelling that one out for me. Yeah, I mean, so much credit to Tibbs. I talked about it a few times already, but he needs and deserves more shout outs, because I think there's this idea that he is a old school coach that has not evolved beyond where the game was when he first got to the NBA, or when he first got a head coaching job with the Bulls, or when he was an assistant with the Celtics, or even with the Knicks before that. But in terms of like, since he's been a Knicks coach, like he has certain principles that he's not going to waver on. And those things you can argue are stubborn, but I think for most coaches, they have certain principles that they are just not going to waver on. I think most good coaches have those. And I think Tibbs has his, but I think to get to those principles, one of them being the driving kick game, like get into the paint, draw help, and then trust the pass, get the team in rotation and make open shots. Like that has been since literally day one. Try to improve the corner three frequency, try to make more corner threes, try to get more open corner threes. Like all those things are hallmarks of a good modern offense. And he has helped this Knicks team after losing Julius Randle and not having OG Anunoby for a lot of it, and having some challenges in terms of like, spacing and shooting. And I get it that maybe he can lean into spacing and shooting around Brunson a little more. But I think in terms of where this offensive is, I don't think where this offense is, I don't think you can say that he doesn't deserve a lot of credit for helping this team again be one of the top offenses in the NBA, and do it in a way that is very different than last year. I mean, remember last year was a lot, the isolation frequency was much higher with Julius Randle. It was, it was the possession game, winning that, dominant offensive rebounding, low turnovers, don't foul, get to the free throw line. Like those are like the things. And to be fair, those things kept their ceiling as an offense, on the lower side. And in the playoffs against the Cavs and against the Heat, their offense could not get to the point, especially in the half court in both series, to where they were producing enough points. And I think that was because of how they were getting to their offense, and obviously the Randall injury and his lack of performance and efficiency on that end. They just didn't have enough offensively. So I think this year, even without Julius, who I love and will defend to high heaven, even without Julius, I think they are set up better this year than last year in terms of carrying over their offense, which is going to see a hit, because you always see a hit offensively. Usually, unless you're an elite team like the Warriors or the Nuggets, but the Knicks are not going to be as good offensively, but I think they're going to be better offensively. And it's not saying a lot, because they were bad in a lot of those games last year, but I think they're going to be much better set up offensively this year with the better spacing, the DiVincenzo piece of it, the Hartenstein starting, and then Jalen Brunson just being like a significantly better player than he was last year. And that to me is, I made mention of it earlier this week. Like he probably should get some most improved player consideration based on like the leap going from, borderline all-star last year to all NBA first team this year. That is it's one thing to go from just like to a ancillary piece, but to go from there to maybe like a solid starter, or a solid starter to borderline all-star. Like that's a big leap. But to me, a bigger leap is going from borderline all-star to first team NBA potentially. That to me is a massive leap. So with that, on that factor alone, the Knicks are probably in better shape offensively this year than last. But I think Tibbs has set the culture. That first press conference said it. He set the expectations, and they've gotten guys that perform and treat the game and respect the game and have a similar work ethic, that buy into what Tibbs is selling, and it's just a perfect marriage right now in terms of the synergy between the players and the coach. And Tibbs deserves a lot of credit to help get this team to 50 wins. So Robert, couldn't agree more, man. I think Tibbs deserves a ton of credit. Let's go Knicks. Thank you again. Ryan, thank you so much. You're always there supporting us. I appreciate that. A win is a win. Not afraid of Miami. Here we go. We match up well versus Philly. Not afraid of the Bucks. This team is too special. Bring on Boston. Hashtag Brunts him for first team. Yeah, I think I don't know. I wouldn't say he's locked up first team all NBA, but I think with another 40-point game today, I think the narrative and the push for him to get to the first team is going to be too strong. And it's probably unfair to Tatum that the Celtics have pretty much wrapped up or have had the first seed wrapped up for seemingly months now. So I think there's probably a little bit of staleness in terms of like how the media is viewing the Celtics. Like they've been so dominant, and it's probably a little boring to vote Tatum first team all NBA, and he's a deserving first team all NBA player. He's had a fantastic year. I think his defense continues to improve. The team has had a monumentally good year, like an incredible year. They're incredibly hard to stop offensively, and Tatum is still, despite the Porzingis factor, despite Jaylen Brown having a really good year and Drew Holiday making every corner three and Derek White doing Derek White things, Jason Tatum is still the most important offensive piece on that team, and most important player on a team that just ran roughshod over the Eastern Conference. So he is a deserving first team all NBA contender, but Jalen Brunson to me is going to get the nod based on how he was able to carry this Knicks team over the past several weeks to get them to 50 wins, to get them to the number 2 seed. So I think that the narrative, sometimes is the reason why things happen in the voting world in terms of sports awards. I think that Jalen Brunson is going to eke out Tatum on that first team all NBA. And then, in terms of win is a win, not afraid of Miami. As I mentioned, you should not be afraid of Miami. Just have a healthy level of respect for what they are going to do defensively to make life hard on Jalen Brunson. And if they end up playing the Heat, it would be a series based on how well the Knicks respond to the Heat, completely not selling out on him, but overloading or flooding his side of whatever side of the court Brunson is on, and really making things feel claustrophobic, which I felt the Knicks, the last time they played the Heat, I felt things were claustrophobic for Brunson, and they're going to try to do the same thing. He's going to have to, as Tibbs says all the time, read the game, trust the pass, and move it, and the Knicks are going to have to make him pay. But it would be a matchup based on how well the Knicks can take advantage of how Miami is defending Brunson. And in terms of matching up against Philadelphia, let's assume Mitch is fine. He's healthy. You have 2 centers, 2 legit high-level defensive centers that you can put on him. You have Anunoby, who, if you want to throw at Embiid, it's a pretty good option to have. So you have 3 guys that you can feel pretty comfortable. And Achua, and this is not, I don't know how many minutes he's going to see in that potential series, but he has played Embiid well in the past. Really does a good job of keeping his hands high, doesn't reach in, makes Embiid shoot over the top, which is the best you can do against him. Keep him off the free throw line. That Achua has done a solid job in the past. So you add him to the mix. You have 4 guys that you don't feel like it's a complete mismatch. And as I mentioned earlier, if Embiid is making that hang dribble pull up from that right elbow, like, it's just going to be a long night. And you just hope that he doesn't have a series where he does that 4 times, because he can. And that's the worry with him. And you have Oubre, who has done a nice job on Brunson before. The only other thing I worry about with the 76ers is I talked about the Maxey piece. I don't think the Knicks have a great answer for him on the defensive end, because you don't have the great on-ball defender against small guards like Quentin Grimes was. And, it's not a role that I love Anunoby in for a full game. Do it in spurts. But Maxey was still getting to some of his spots against Anunoby in that January battle. So we'll see where the Knicks go, but I am going to hone in on that matchup. Obviously, 76ers Heat is going to be a big deal. I don't know who I want to see. I probably will lean the Heat in terms of my preferred matchup based on one has Embiid, one doesn't. And I think it's as simple as that for me. I think the Knicks, I don't know what the Knicks would probably prefer. I think you just want to stay away from the Hall, the not just a Hall of Famer. Like you want to stay away from the guy having one of the great offensive seasons in the history of the NBA. Like that guy you just don't want to see as the higher seed. It just he can wreck a playoff, man. He can just would it shock anyone? Like if just be I know we're like on cloud 9, the 50 wins, the number 2 seed, but would it shock any of you if Embiid averages 35 in that series and Maxey averages 26 or 24 on decent efficiency and the Sixers, are playing a game 7 at are playing a deciding game against the Knicks? It wouldn't shock me. I think that's the worry. So I don't know. I think I'd probably want to see the Heat there. But Ryan, thank you so much for that super chat. I really appreciate it. Keith, appreciate the contribution. Always appreciate you guys supporting us, keeping this operation going. Giving up to duck an opponent would be the absolute antithesis of what the Knicks franchise is. Hell of a season. Time to ride with our guys. No matchup will be easy. Thanks for another great regular season KFS. Well, thank you guys. This is my second year with KFS, and from the start, it's been an absolute blast. I know I am completely biased, but I think in the content world and covering teams, in what we do, I think that we do it better than anyone, top to bottom. So it's an absolute honor to be a small part of it and to help produce content that we can all be proud of, because I think that's what KFS does day after day. So kudos to everyone else on the KFS faculty. You guys are all incredible. I learned so much from all of you. You guys are all obviously you guys mean the world to me as friends, as colleagues, and just to do this with you guys has been an absolute pleasure. And the first part, you don't want to duck, we're not going to duck an opponent. I talked about it. That's not Tibbs. That's not the franchise. I think Keith nails it. It's not the team. They weren't going to do it. They weren't going to do what the Cavs did by resting their guys in the fourth quarter. They were just not. It was you have a medical issue with Mitch, keep him out. Fine. Hartenstein's got a minutes restriction. Not going to want to push it. He played 30 minutes today. You're not going to want to push that more. That's why he didn't play the overtime. But beyond that, I mean, DiVincenzo, 50 minutes, first time in his career. They were going to play, and they were going to go through the finish line, as Tibbs talked about. They weren't going to duck any opponent. I don't think the matchup was, any of them were that far apart in terms of like an obvious first round opponent. I don't think the Pacers were an obvious first round opponent in terms of quality of play. The team is a pain in the ass to guard, and they make you play fast. And it's just would not have been an easy walk in the park series if they ended up playing Indiana. And even if there was like a clear choice, I just don't think this team, this coach, this franchise would have tried to finagle their way into a matchup they deemed to be better, because that's, as Keith says, it's the antithesis of what this franchise is right now. And I talked about pride and how much we are proud of this team. That's a reason why, right? There's a pragmatic view, and then there's just like, this is what sports is. You try to win every game, and you try to compete every single time you're out there. And that's the thing I think we all appreciate about this team as a New York ball club, New York fans. This is what we appreciate, what they do time and again. And it's why, of all the regular seasons I've watched, I can't remember a regular season that has brought me this much pride and joy. So part of that, almost all of it, is based on how they play and how they carry themselves. So thank you, Keith. Really appreciate that. I couldn't agree more with your sentiment. Dan Hidalgo, thank you so much. Screw it. Bring on Philly. JB for MVP. So Dan has laid down his marker. He wants to see the 76ers. I'm curious if we have more of those, where it's going to be. Maybe we could put out a poll later on in terms of like who, as Knicks fans, we prefer to see. So I have my inclination to not want to see Embiid, but I think it's fair to just want Philly based on Embiid maybe not be at his best, and just don't want to see the Heat because of all the struggles and all the stress that they can provide. I mean, they are a challenge in their own right. So I am curious though, if you guys have any other preferences regarding who you want to see, Philly or Miami, because I think it's a fascinating thought experiment in terms of like what each team can do. They're very different. They have different strengths and weaknesses clearly, but regardless, I think either one is going to present the Knicks with some problems. It will not be easy because Knicks don't do things easy, and that's part of why we love him. I think JB for MVP, like he's going to get a lot of. He's not going to win it, but he is, in terms of like the spirit of that award. If you look at some of the on-off numbers offensively, like they go from a fantastic offense to a tragic offense when he's off the court. When he's playing, they are humming. They're just hard to guard. There's no great answers for him right now. There's better answers than some. Like you just can't play drop against them. So I think that is a bad answer. But if you want to put two on the ball, it's a problem because they've gotten so adept at moving it and making you pay. If you play some sort of isolation game like that, to me, depending on some of the pieces, like if you're Miami, you probably are okay with Bam coming out and playing an ISO against Brunson. If I'm the Knicks, I probably don't want to see that as I'm thinking about it, because I think Bam is one of the better on-ball defenders on the perimeter, has been for years. So he can give Brunson problems by staying in front and contesting late. But I think that in terms of like where going back to Dan's point here about Brunson being the MVP and what he can provide on the offensive end and how the Knicks perform when he's not, like, I don't know if there's a better indication of like a value than those on-off offensive numbers, which are incredible in terms of the difference. John's talked a lot about it, how much better they are when Brunson is on the court versus off. So in the playoffs, you're going to get 40 plus minutes, so it won't be as much of an issue, but there will be games where you're going to get McBride in the game and he's with Bojan, and you're going to have to figure out a way in those 5 to 8 minutes to string together some baskets. That's why I thought those Bojan points in the fourth quarter so huge, because they're going to need him to have stretches like that in the playoffs to win a couple of rounds. But Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Bernard Richardson, 2-seed us. Yes, sir. We're about to put these demons through an Ironman. Let's fucking go, Knicks. Why not now? Why not now is right. Go to the KFS merch store. Maybe you could put the link in the YouTube chat. Got some merch out there. The Why Not Now. Or is it Why Not Now or Why Not Us? I think it's Why Not Now is all the merch for the KFS, for the playoff motto. That's right. Why not now? I've in January talked about the ceiling of this team winning, potentially going to the finals completely healthy. I've had to accept the Randall loss and try to recalibrate how I view this team and how they're, what their ceiling is. But look, it's not the time to necessarily discuss that in like great detail, but I am not going to put a ceiling on them right here, right now. They're the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. Like if you're the number 2 seed in the East, like you have a fighting chance to get to the NBA Finals. Which, I mean, saying it out loud seems insane based on no Randall, where this team, all the ups and downs this year, but they're the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, and things happen. Boston will have to play 2 rounds before a potential Knicks matchup, and that's a lot of minutes on the court that things can go haywire, injuries and such. Obviously not rooting for that, but things happen. Things happen in the playoffs. It happened in the playoffs last year. That injuries were a big part of how those playoffs, especially in the Eastern Conference, ended up playing out for the Knicks, for the Heat, for the Bucks. So I think you have to view the Knicks as a live threat here. We'll have plenty of time to talk about any potential Boston matchup. I'm not going to go down that route because we have a tough first round ahead of us, regardless of who wins against the Heat or the 76ers. But we are the 2 seed. And there's no reason why the Knicks can't see themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals in like a game 5 in Boston, tied 2-2 with a shot to win it. That's the sort of where this team is right now. And I'm not going to cap their ceiling because they deserve us to view them as a live threat to get to the finals because they're the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, and that deserves respect. So put some respect on them, and I'm sure Sal going to do that right now. Thank you, Bernard. Dom to Dennis, thank you so much. I love you guys, and we love you too. It's like the sweetest message I've ever gotten here on a KFS post-game show. That is, I think there's love in the air right now. I think that there's a lot of good feelings, a lot of good vibes. Vibes are immaculate, dare I say. And I feel like we are all feeling that because of pride and feeling like we've gotten to an important stage that we can now view this team as the number 2 seed and just sit with it for a bit. Let these other teams go battle out in the play-in, and we can sort of sit back, relax, watch those games with maybe a little bit of stress-free viewing, because we view us as better than both of those teams. And I think the Knicks and the Knicks fans should view themselves as better than whoever comes out of that Heat 76er matchup. So I am looking forward on a personal level to watch the play-in and just enjoy it, because the Knicks have given us that. They've given us a prideful season that gives us a little break here to respect and to honor this team that deserves respect and honor based on where they came from, what they had to deal with, and all of it. I think there's just a level of inevitable has been talked about a lot regarding Jalen Brunson, but the way the Knicks play is inevitable. And the what they do and how they respect the game and how they don't give an inch is inevitable. And in the regular season, that's worth a lot of wins, especially when you are equipped with an MVP candidate. Even when you lose an all-star, the Knicks give themselves a floor that is high enough that allows them, with their superstar, to win a lot of games just based on sheer will. And I know that edge, that advantage gets almost erased in the playoffs. And that has been I think the biggest criticism of any Thibodeau team. And I think it's a valid one. And it's something that we are going to have to reckon with as fans and as analysts of this team. Is like, is there another level for them to get to? Because there's been the We Here season, obviously, and the Cavs series last year. I felt like the Cavs present some options for the Knicks that the Knicks are uniquely equipped to take advantage of. But in the playoffs against the Heat, some of what the Knicks do offensively, and I talked about the struggles they had. Things were very tough in the playoffs on the offensive end for the Knicks. But I feel like this team is a little different. I feel like they have more answers. And it starts with obviously Jalen Brunson, but it's beyond him. It's the Hartenstein factor. It's when things are drying up, and you see this time and time again. You run your initial action on one side, nothing's materializing. You watch Hartenstein flash to the around the elbow extended area, high post area. Ball swung to him. You already have, let's say, DiVincenzo on the Hartenstein side. So it's you have 3 players on the Brunson side that was running the initial action, and then DiVincenzo and Hartenstein on the other. So Hartenstein flashes, and then you could play 2-man game with Hartenstein and DiVincenzo, DHOs or blind pig, and you could do certain things that can keep the offense moving. The Knicks play at a flow more now than I can ever remember a Knicks team playing. You probably have to go back to some of the 80s, like high scoring teams, which I didn't obviously see play, but there was some, good offensive there, but they never did in the 90s. And even the 12-13 team, it was like a drive and kick team. And obviously you had the Carmelo having an MVP scoring season and the shooting around him. That was sort of the MO, but this team now can do so many things offensively based on the dexterity and of Hartenstein and his ability to make plays with the ball in his hands. It's an element they didn't have fully realized last year, but it's fully realized this year. And with Brunson's elevation and DiVincenzo and McBride, if I don't know how many minutes he'll get on a game-to-game basis, but he is a legitimate threat offensively. And I think there's going to be games where Bojan is going to string together some big offensive plays, sequences for this team. So there's just more answers this year than there were last year. So I'm fully expecting the Knicks to play better on the offensive end this year because there's more options. So I'm looking forward to see where they can go, and when the initial action is choked off, just to keep an eye on like how they can get to their second side stuff, because it really wasn't a great option last year. It's a better option this year. Thank you, Dom. Sam Garcia's dad, number 2, never felt so good. Bring on anybody. Yeah. See, this is the sentiment that I love. Number 2 never felt this good. They were number 2 in 12-13. If I'm not mistaken, I think they had the second best record that year. And that team was as good as they were. There was they had peaked a little earlier in the season. If I'm, not mistaken, it just felt like they were a little stale as they got to the playoffs. Obviously Melo had the shoulder thing, and there was some age that has, whether it was Jason Kidd and some of the other pieces maybe getting a little fatigued down in the stretch. So yes, they were the number 2 seed. I didn't feel great about them going to that playoff round because of how they got there, despite winning 54 games. But this year, I think they're peaking for where this team is right now. I feel like they are peaking. I feel like they are playing their best basketball right now that they're capable of playing. I don't know if it's the best version of this team based on no Randall, but if you take Randall out of the picture here, and he's out of the picture, I feel like, again, 6-1 since the Randall news that he was going to miss the year. Big factor. The Knicks needed that clarity to move past. It's always like you have whether it's any kind of health stuff. It's like the worst part always feels like when you don't know, when things are up in the air, when there's question marks, and when things happen, even if they suck, you can prepare for them and you can move past and you can adjust, and mentally you can kind of take the next step. And I think that was important for this team. And I think it was borne out in that 6-1 record. But I feel like with this current group, with Mitch back and Anunoby looking really good, I feel like they're peaking at the right time. That 12-13 team was not. So I think that's why I agree with Sam Garcia's dad here, that number 2 never felt so good, because this team as a number 2 seed is a live threat that I feel like transcends that 12-13 ball club. My opinion anyway. Bring on anyone. I feel like it's the right way of looking at it. I can talk till I'm blue in the face about the Heat and the 76ers and all the problems they can present, but the Knicks should be favored in either one of those series or matchups. So going to be interesting to see who they end up getting. Thank you so much for that super chat. Really appreciate it. Maple Maxo, thank you so much. Really appreciate the contributions today and every day. You guys do it. Disregarding the turnovers today, I have so much faith in the Brunson, Hart, Devo triangle offense at the end of games. T-squared for game 2. That's an Andrew Claudio thing. I don't know. T-squared social, if we can get that in the mix here before get an announcement. There might have been one. I'm sorry if I'm missing any playoff watch parties that have been scheduled already in the works, but I would imagine that we will have one for the playoffs if one has not already been scheduled. Maybe one day I can get up there from my Chapel Hill abode to join everyone. That would be a great thing. I can maybe do in the playoffs. We'll see. So much faith in the Brunson, Hart, Devo triangle offense at the end of games. Yeah, there's like it's an interesting, and I was thinking about where this Knicks team has been as a fan, and started in the '90s for me, and it just felt like every year 50 wins, and at least in the second round in most years, through the Van Gundy years in the late '90s into just into the early 2000s, where playoffs were expected, and then you had the really rough years in the early 2000s, and then the Phil Jackson years. And I'm only bringing him up because of what Maple Maxwell makes mention of, which is the triangle offense. I mean, it's I have it gives me heartburn and nightmares just trying to recall the Knicks trying to shove the triangle offense down our collective throats during those Derek Fisher years. Was it years? I don't know. Whenever he was the head coach, and they were trying to run the triangle, and clearly the Knicks didn't have the personnel to run it in a way that was effective, and it was just like it felt like there was the Knicks were playing a game that had moved past them in terms of their offensive structure. But if you look at this team today, there is a lot of triangle influence. The split cutting that they'll run a lot, the blind pig action, the ball moving side to side, Hartenstein playing out of the high post. Like, there are so many triangle influences with this current offense that is just interesting to me based on like where the Knicks were during the Phil years. But it does speak to the timelessness and some of the ideas and principles of that offense. And I don't know if Maple Maxwell is strictly making this a triangle of like a three players, or if he's actually talking about the triangle offense. I'm going to use this super chat as a way to just talk about the triangle offense, like the triangle offense, which the Knicks have been slowly incorporating more and more, with Hartenstein, playing that role. If you go back to, the Knicks and Joakim Noah playing the high post when the Knicks had Derek Fisher and or Phil signed him, and they were playing through Joakim and all that. But this team has more options out of that, because you have the DiVincenzo piece of it, and the fact that when you go to the second side and Hartenstein flashes out, we all know teams are playing high on DiVincenzo, so they're trying to take away his deep 3-point threat. So they are crowding him, and it just opens up that back door, call it a blind pig. It's a triangle flow that is just triggered based on the Hartenstein flash, knowing that, if the Knicks are not getting anything clean out of that first action, he knows he's triggered to move up, get that pass, and that triggers DiVincenzo to quickly make that back cut, or whether it's McBride. They tried it a couple of times today. I don't think they actually gained any offensive buckets out of it, but it's a element that the Knicks use all the time, and it's certainly a element of the triangle offense. But it's another example of like where this offensive evolution has gotten to. It's a truly diverse offense around an MVP candidate, and it's just a fantastic job by this coaching staff and the players to adjust. Just watch some of the early season games. It's an unrecognizable change in offensive approach based on where they were in October. Game 1 against the Celtics, and missing every single shot in the paint. But it was a lot of Randall trying to like bully his way in, and they even evolved a little bit based on Randall, instead of being so far out or starting his post-ups a little bit deeper and being more efficient in those looks. And then you had the doubles, and then you had the spraying the ball out. Like they adjusted from that early season, struggles, especially finishing in the paint. But there's just been so many different iterations of this team that they've gotten to the point where I feel like there's a argument to be made that they have peaked as a ball club heading into the playoffs, which is what you want. You don't want to peak early. You don't want to peak, you don't want to peak early. And I feel like the last time the Knicks won 50 games, they peaked early. That 12-13 team was kind of stale as they got to the playoffs, but I would not say that is the case this year. Thank you, Maple Maxo. Knicks Fan Patrol. I also love you guys. Love is in the air. Oh, I love you guys too. It's been a fun opportunity to sort of celebrate a important step, which is 50 wins and the number 2 seed. It should be enjoyed and celebrated. And I hope the team can, and they're probably not going to do it for more than tonight. I'm sure the coach is already on to prep for the potential matchup options here, the 76ers, the Heat. But I hope this team can take a few moments to recognize how important it was to get to where they are and how much they had to do to get there. There's so much more to be done, but to get to 50 wins and the number 2 seed after all the many reasons why that was just not going to happen with the injuries and all the problems this team had and trying to figure out a way to string together offense when you just didn't have much to go on. And again, shout out to some of the guys that may not see big playoff minutes based on matchups, but Precious Achiuwa, for one. I don't think the Knicks win the overtime period today without him. He also played a stretch of games where he was playing 40 minutes a night and giving us headaches with the spacing and playing more power forward than, we're probably ever going to want to see from a non-spacer, but help the Knicks get to 50 wins. So many players on this roster helped the Knicks get to 50 wins and had major influence on where this team is right now. And Precious Achiuwa is one of those guys. 2 big rim defenses today in that overtime period. Had the stop against DeRozan on that late under a minute shot. Kept his hands out of the cookie jar. Didn't get baited into a foul call. Had the putback play in the overtime. Just a big moment for him. And I hope he doesn't get lost in any of the celebrations or the appreciation for where this team is, because I don't think the Knicks are the number 2 seed without him. Because even if they weren't sublime minutes, if they were minutes that were more heartache than not based on the offensive fit, you just needed a guy to play competent NBA minutes and play almost 40 minutes a night for a long stretch of basketball and do so when this team just didn't have another option. And Precious Achiuwa did that, and he deserves so much credit for being up to that challenge and up to that task. So I hope we can all take a moment and just recognize his impact on this 50-win Knicks season. Thank you, Knicks Fan Patrol. Really appreciate that. Sam Garcia's dad is a JB Iverson comp there. So I did, when Julius got hurt, I mentioned the 01 76ers as like a terrible comparison for a lot of ways, because the Knicks role players are better than the 76ers team that went to the finals. But if you look at, you have 2 guards, 6'2" and under, Jalen. I mean, they're probably close in height, that don't have, with Julius out, a all-star performer to take some of the pressure off. That, and people forget, Iverson, as elite as he was as a ball handler, as a finisher, did most of his damage in the mid-range against taller, rangier defenders. And that is where, to me, the comparison for those 2 players really rings true, because it's rare that you get guys at that height that can take advantage and score in that area where you are constantly taking mid-range shots against taller, longer defenders, and you are shooting high degree of difficulty looks time and time again. So that, to me, is where the comparison is actually pretty accurate regarding small guards playing in the mid-range, short mid-range a lot, and doing so with a level of confidence also that they weren't going to break down. I feel like that was the Iverson thing that was so amazing, was that even more than I don't know if he's more than Jay, because Jalen is on the ground a lot, but Iverson, I feel like, was always getting knocked to the floor, and you always wondered, like, if he was going to get up, and wasn't as stout or as sturdy as Jalen physically, but he never stayed on the ground. Like, always got up, and always, like, he took a beating game out, game in, and always got up and always continued to put pressure on the defense. And that, to me, is another way that comparison is rings true, because as many times as Jalen hits the floor, I'm never concerned that he's not going to get up. He is a, whether it's a charge, whether it's a finish where he comes down and he lands on an ankle and he's on the floor. He just always gets up and he continues to put pressure on the defense and does it in areas of the floor that you typically do not see guards of his size perform. It's a complete unique ability to shoot over longer, taller defenders in a part of the floor that is usually reserved for the Kawhi Leonards or the Paul Georges or the any of those big wing type players, or Devin Booker, who is a legitimate 6'5". Like those are Kevin Durant. These are the guys you typically see perform in similar spots on the court. But Jalen Brunson does, because he has just incredible touch. But he also, on a strictly technique factor, has a release point that is probably more comparable to a 6'4" guard than a 6'1" guard, because it's a 2-motion shot. It's a high release point. It allows him to make shots over shot contests and do so somehow efficiently, which continues to be incredible based on some of the shot quality data that you look at. Like, he just does not take typically easy looks unless he's being set up for open catch and shoot threes or driving closeouts. Typically he's working really hard for his looks and continues to do so and get points and do it in a way that is efficient. Incredible job. Thank you, Sam Garcia's dad. All right. Jess, how are you? Appreciate that. Hashtag 50 wins, 2 seed in the East. I believe in this team. What a season. This is Tibbs culture. Cheers, DJ. Hashtag ECF Dark Horse. Hashtag Bruns him. Couldn't say it better myself, Jess. I believe in this team too. Really gonna go down as one of the most enjoyable 50-win number, or just one of the most enjoyable regular seasons that I've ever watched. I think this team deserves all the credit to get there. The Tibbs culture I've talked about, you can't tell the story about this regular season without talking about Tom Thibodeau, who I am sure probably had to do his best coaching when the team was really down bodies and didn't have, if we're going to be honest, didn't have enough to win consistently. But there's a belief, we have enough to win, quote unquote, which is a line that he has used often, that trickles down to the players. And you are, as a head coach, you instill belief despite obstacles. If you can do that, you to me are doing the heavy lifting, because the X's and O stuff and all the other things like that, it's so important and it's a big factor. But you also don't know, credit, sign credit. There's a lot of assistant coaches here trying to help figure it out and try to balance out the offensive attack and add elements to try to take advantage of what the Knicks do well, what the teams are trying to take away. But no doubt Tibbs has his imprint on where they are in terms of the on-court, strictly X's and O stuff. That is, as I talked about, evolved tremendously over the season. But you have to instill belief in your team. And yes, these are all professionals. These are a veteran team that probably shouldn't lose belief, but they're also humans that saw injury after injury and played games where it just felt like they just didn't have enough on the offensive end to put forth a requisite effort to score enough points. But the coach, and this is the culture that Jess is talking about, just was not going to allow them to get down on themselves. And his job, Tom's job, was to get them to believe enough to get some bodies back. And listen, they didn't get them all back, as we've touched on, but they got Mitch back and they got OG back. And that might be enough, because once you got those guys back, guys start to fall back into their normal roles. You have a more balanced, deeper team. That belief then becomes a lot easier. But when things were not looking great and we were wondering, is the team going to see the play-in? The coach, the culture that he sets along with Jalen Brunson, to me, kept the belief and kept them just stringing enough wins together to where they end up going 21-15 without Julius Randle and without OG Anunoby through for a lot of those games. Thank you, Jess. Ben Kim Gervey, thank you so much, always being there with us, whether it's the watch parties or these post-game shows. Thank you so much. Now that the pre-playoffs are over, bring on the season. Hashtag storybook season. Hashtag order of the Leon Rose. It's a good opportunity to talk about Leon Rose. The synergy between the president and the head coach has been seamless since the Cam Reddish trade. And obviously there were some moments with the Fournier and Kemba, the Reddish deal. They have not been in sync the entire time, but for the vast majority of the time that Tibbs has been the head coach and Leon Rose has been the president, they have been in complete lockstep. And to me, that is a major factor, because you have to know that there is a certain player that Tibbs is going to require. And this is why if you're going to be anti-Tibbs or question him as a head coach, this is a valid criticism, is that those principles and, how he grinds players in the minutes and the expectations, like, that is not for everyone. But for this ball club, you look from the first guy down to the last guy, starting with Jalen Brunson all the way down. They are littered with Tibbs guys. And it's not a skill thing. It's not a talent thing. It is a respect of the game thing. It is a will thing. It is a effort thing. It is a preparedness thing. Those are the things that the Tibbs culture is really setting here. And that's something that Leon Rose recognized. And he made sure to put in place a roster of players that was going to take that message, which is not for everyone, and might be why Tibbs has had short-ish times with certain teams, because that message is not for everyone, but it is for this team. And they are a complete synergy. Head coach and president Leon Rose has done a magnificent job of getting this team to 50 wins and the number 2 seed without disrupting any of the potential long-term plans that this team may or may not have. The optionality is still there with the draft picks, with contracts that are valuable contracts on the books that you couldn't have asked for, in my mind, like legitimately asked for a better situation of where they are right now. A very good ball club that just won 50 games, combined with the fact that they have a ton of flexibility moving forward. That is a complete win for Leon Rose to get the team to where they are now, based on maintaining flexibility in the future. 50 wins, and you have all those draft picks, all those contracts that you can lump together potentially if you want to make changes. But that's for another time, because right now this team is good enough to get to your number 2 seed and do a lot of damage. As I've mentioned before, the Knicks are a live threat to get to the finals, which is the only way to view this team in my mind. And you are going to, and I'm just telling you, warning you right now, there is going to be a significant, may not be a majority, but there will be a significant amount of media talk, regardless of who wins the Heat 76er matchup, that the Knicks are going to lose the first round. And they're going to present you with a lot of the Heat boogeyman stuff. They're going to present you, if it's the 76ers, a lot of the Embiid stuff. The Knicks, as I said, should have a healthy respect for either one of those teams, but they will be favored. It'll be hard-fought series, but the Knicks should win either one with home court advantage. But Ben Kim Gervey, thank you so much for sticking around and helping us out here. Justin, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate that. These Knicks have done it their way all season. Basketball gods are real. 50 wins, a superstar point guard, top flight D, and a great coach. Time for war. Let's go Knicks. It was their way. They have done it from the beginning of the season. Even when things didn't look great, they were doing it their way. And there was never a point where it felt like the team was letting go of the rope. And maybe that is the ultimate credit to the superstar point guard, Justin, that you just talked about, and the head coach for not letting them let go of the rope, because they never fully did. They had games where they struggled, and there was concerns and valid concerns and a lot of question marks on the injury front, but they never let go of the rope. And that is a credit to them. They stuck with it, and won 6 of the last 7 games in the regular season. Got to the number 2 seed, which I don't know, 2 weeks ago was, I don't have the percentages, but, or 3 weeks ago, like it couldn't have been higher than a 20% chance to get to the number 2 seed based on where they were a couple of weeks ago and where they had to go and who they had to leapfrog. And look, injuries happen. The Giannis thing's a big factor, but the Knicks did beat Milwaukee. So that is a big deal. Basketball gods being real, you don't want to test them, right? And this team is not going to, speaking of not doing it any way but their own way, they were not going to test the basketball gods. The defense is not, that is the one thing. Maybe we'll have an X's and O's show. I think I'm doing one with Benji and I think John coming up this week. Be interesting sort of to look back at where this team is defensively. Because I do have not concerns, but I've not loved some of the Mitch minutes on the defensive end. And when OG is not on the floor, I have not loved some of the minutes there. But again, we are going to get a heavy burden of minutes for their starters. So maybe it's a minor issue, but I'm not concerned about their defense. I'm not going to say that right now, but I'm curious of how they can defend at a high level when any of their 2 superstar defenders, and they have 2 superstar defenders, by the way, it's Hartenstein and Anunoby. They have been stars on the defensive end, and they are an incredible tandem defensively. I thought, just to make a comparison here, I thought Grimes and Robinson last year was incredible as a tandem defensively, but I feel like Anunoby and Hartenstein has eclipsed those guys. And Grimes and Robinson were just hellacious, especially in that Cavs series, making life hard for Donovan Mitchell. So for Hartenstein and Anunoby to even get past that level speaks to where they are as a defensive duo. And of course, you factor in Josh Hart on the defensive end playing. There's just very few guys that can rotate consistently as crisply and as on time as Josh Hart. He gets into the ball. Phenomenal defender. And then DiVincenzo making plays with his underrated athleticism, playing that free safety game. A really talented defensive group as a starting lineup. Just have some questions at how they're going to defend at a high level in the minutes when you don't have their star defenders in the game. But that is for another day. It is time to go for war, Justin. We will have whoever we end up playing, it is going to be a battle. So going to be a lot of fun to watch it with all you. Thank you, Justin. Jibo, thank you so much for hanging out with us and supporting us. So amazing. Love this team. Number 2 seed, baby. Glad we didn't rest anyone. Here. Bring on Philly or whoever. We don't ever duck smoke. We New York, baby. It is like the New York way, right? Justin talking about doing it the New York way. Do they do it their way all season? There's no ducking of anyone. We saw the Cavs rest their guys, man. And there was no way Tibbs was going to rest his. There was an inkling of a question of whether or not Brunson was going to come back in the game in the fourth quarter. Clearly, I was insane for even broaching the idea in my head because he was going to come back. He was always going to come back in that game and try to win it. I will say that shot that he ended up missing at the end of regulation was in and out and an absolute incredible ability shot attempt to get the ball to the rim and come so close to making it. I mean, it was like Caruso had knocked it away. Brunson had to recover it, and then going to his left going over his left shoulder, which is the tougher shoulder to sort of like turn over when you are a left-hand player. Or going over his right shoulder. It was on the left side of the court. So a tougher fadeaway going on the left corner, falling out of bounds and almost made it. Like that would have been like the best icing on the cake, but the Knicks did enough in the overtime to pull it out. But there was never any doubt that today the Knicks were going to try to run through the finish line. And we know Mitch didn't play more than 7 minutes. Medical recommendation, precautionary is what the early signs are, early reports, and Hartenstein got to 30, so he was at his minutes restriction. That's why we saw Achua there in the fourth quarter. In the overtime. But they were going to run through the finish line. That is what Tibbs had set that expectation, and I'm glad they did. I'm glad they got to 50 wins. It means a lot, and that number 2 seed means a lot too. It's going to look really cool to see that. I haven't looked at the bracket and just see the Knicks with the number 2 next to them. On any of the websites, but will be very fun to watch that or look at that, get a screenshot, and just to appreciate that for the moment, because I think this team deserves that. Robert Cross, again, thank you so much for another super chat there. The Knicks will represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. So Robert Cross has laid down his flag. He is calling for the Knicks, that the Knicks will be in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think as the number 2 seed, you should think anything less, to be honest. I am of two minds of appreciating where the Knicks are and viewing this team as a live threat and the favorite to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, combined with legitimate concern or respect of who their opponent is going to be. But listen, this team, this ball club, this from the head coach down, they deserve to be appreciated. I get it. They had a scratch and claw to get to 50 wins. Is a bunched up Eastern Conference. A break here or there that goes against them. Maybe they lose and they're at 49 and they're the 3, and we're having maybe a slightly different conversation. But 50 wins and number 2 matters. And I think the Knicks are, I think it's a slight favorite, but I think they should be the favorite to go to the Eastern Finals and likely play the Celtics in a potential Eastern Conference matchup, which I can't even comprehend how that is going to envelope this city if you get a Boston Knicks Eastern Conference Finals. I getting goosebumps just thinking about that potential matchup, but a lot has to be done on both sides of the bracket. Boston has to win out on their side to get there too. And as we know, Boston has had their postseason failures have, I think, been a little overrated, but they can go through stretches where the threes aren't going down and late game offense can be a little spotty and just not crisp, and there's not much flow, but they're the heavy favorites, but there's no guarantee they're going to get out of their side of the bracket either. So Knicks should be favored on their side, and just going to enjoy this one and get to watch that play in and look forward to diving in on some film regarding potential Heat or 76er first round matchup. But Robert, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Thank you. Kevin Wilson, how are we, man? I get not wanting to face Philly or Miami, me too, but seeing the Knicks as the number 2 seed feels so good, and winning that series would be even better. Yeah, I think I'm in lockstep with you, where I get the pragmatic view of wanting to face Indiana in the 3-6. Completely reasonable take, but I also just wanted that 50 win in the win column. Wanted that 50th win. And I wanted that number 2 seed in the playoffs. And getting home court in the second round, potential second round, is big. It's a big deal. If they play Milwaukee in the 2-3, I am measurably more confident in that series with the Knicks having home court. I know home court there used to be a point in the 90s where home court advantage was a much bigger deal. It was especially in Game 7 deciding games. Like, it was rare for a road team to win. I think that advantage has it's just not there anymore for whatever reason. I mean, there's probably something along the lines of like shooting variance and the high level of 3-point shots have just made things a little less predictable in terms of the favorite winning as many times as they were in the 90s, early 2000s. But you want home court, right? And I think the Knicks getting home court throughout until they get to the Eastern Conference Finals is a huge deal. And maybe it's a big enough deal to where you rather, even if you think the Heat and you think the 76ers are a tougher matchup than the Pacers, that it's worth getting the number 2 because it's the home court could be that impactful, especially in a deciding game. So Kevin, I'm with you. I think it's a good way of putting a bow on this game because yeah, you can argue the Pacers are the better matchup, but number 2 does feel good, and 50 wins feels good too. And I'm going to just let that soak in because it just for where this team is, I feel like I didn't expect a 50-win season in middle February where this team was with injuries and everything. So to get there is just a big deal that should be appreciated. Thank you, Kevin. Charlie Boy third, thank you so much. Hey DJ, can't believe we got to 50 wins. Just said that. Neither can I. And there was a point where I didn't think they were getting there. Seems like karma that we may get to end the Heat season, given they ended JRS. What is? Not sure what that is. My ridiculous for. Thank you, Kevin. Yes, since they ended Julius Randle's season. Let's go. Hashtag no more Caruso. Hashtag Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah, probably won't see Caruso again this season with the Bulls being in the 9-10 matchup. He is a pain in the ass. Hell of a player. Made open shots. Got into Brunson late. Created turnovers. Not a fun guy to play. Despite Jalen going from 45 the last game, 40 tonight with Caruso making things difficult for him. Look, the Julius factor, he ended he on January 27th, goes in for the layup. Jaquez goes underneath. I don't think it was a dirty play, dangerous play. But it ended Julius' season. So if the Knicks group, the players view that as even if they view that as a dangerous play, I'm sure in the back of their mind, if they end up getting the Heat, that they're going to relish ending their season because of, Julius's season ending on that day for all intents and purposes. So yeah, I think Charlie, you hit on something that is if you're a human being and you have teammates that get hurt and you may think that there was some, I don't want to say nefariousness, but you feel like there was some unnecessary way of doing things. And we know the Heat have a history here and Bam Adebayo is at the center of it, playing the game in a way that borders on dirty play, that it would feel really good if the Knicks can exact some revenge, not just for Julius, but for the Heat beating the Knicks in last year's playoffs. So I can't argue with that. And can't believe we got in the 50 wins, man. I'm probably gonna have to, like, when I get off here and sit with it a bit, I think it's gonna hit home a little harder that they ended up figuring out a way to get themselves to 50 wins in a season that presented all the different obstacles. It's a big time regular season for this group that I know is not resting on any laurels and that is going to view themselves as a legitimate contender to get to the finals, and they shouldn't feel any other way. Thank you, Charlie. Stevens B. Guillerme, sorry for butchering your name. I apologize, but thank you so much for your super chat, and I appreciate you being there and hanging out with us. It's so cool. Almighty. Okay. I might have lost connection there for a brief moment. At least my screen did. Just Kev, just make a note in the chat that I'm still going. Froze for a second, so I'm back up. Okay, good. All right, so almighty second seed, 50 wins. The perseverance is like, to me, that's of all the different things we've talked about and the pride, it's all about the perseverance of the team, right? I mean, you appreciate as a New York basketball fan a team that plays like this, and it's been even when they've struggled, even when things have not gone their way through the Tibbs era, from the We Here season to now, like you never thought this team was cheating the game, and most teams probably would have performed tonight in a different way, and maybe a coach would have decided to take the foot off the gas a little bit because of where the Knicks were going to, what their floor was as the number 3 once the Magic won. But it would have felt like, in a way, and I get the you try to get your best matchup, and that might carry the day in the end. And some teams, like the Cavaliers, are going to view that as more important than trying to get the higher seed, or they're going to view health as the more important piece of it, and the risk of injury. It's a fair way of looking at it. This was never going to be this team. They were never going to cheat the game by trying to manufacture their opponent in the playoffs. They were never going to do that, because it's just not how their coach views the game. It's not how the players view the game. They're in complete lockstep with that, and they persevered from the opening night through the end of the regular season. And you think about like all the moments, right? The not able to make a shot at the rim for several games, and Julius trying to figure out a way to round himself into shape after the ankle surgery, and things not looking good, and the offense bogging down and moving past that, and then the trade and all these different things. And then you have the Julius injury and the OG uncertainty, his injury, and Mitch going down, and all the things that have been presented, that they never lacked perseverance, never. And you can't not say it doesn't start with the head coach, and you can't not say it doesn't start with the best player on the team, who is just a unique presence in terms of how he goes about his business. And I thought it was completely telling and really an important moment when Tibbs, before the game, compared Jalen Brunson to Patrick Ewing, not in their on-court performance, not in their skill set, completely different players, obviously, but he compared them in terms of their work ethic. And he said, when he showed up when Van Gundy hired him, and he showed up, and he would get to his first summer as a assistant coach on the Knicks, and there was Patrick Ewing in like the middle of July with a full sweat at 34, 35 at that point, late stages of his career, like still putting in his effort level. That was never something that he bragged about. It was never something that was talked about a lot. But if you were a viewer, observer, or you covered that team, his work ethic was legendary. So if you have a front seat to that, and you're Tom Thibodeau, to compare anyone to Patrick Ewing in terms of work ethic is the highest level of compliment. There is no bigger compliment Tom Thibodeau can pay to a player than say, your work ethic is on the level of Patrick Ewing. I'm just telling you, he's not comparing them as players. He's comparing their work ethic. And if you were around Patrick Ewing, his work ethic was legendary. It was the thing that made him such a dominant force above anything else. Like he never, there's that phrase again, he never cheated the game. And Jalen Brunson never cheats the game with anything less than elite work ethic. And so I thought it was a big moment there for Tibbs to compare Jalen Brunson to Patrick Ewing on that specific attribute, which I'm telling you is one of the highest compliments Tom Thibodeau can pay to a player. Thank you, Stevens. Really appreciate that. Chris Carter, tremendous regular season. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for being there with us, man. Really appreciate that. I may or may not have sprinkled a few shekels on the Knicks to win 50 games, so I am thrilled with the outcome. Congratulations to you. What a great job by this organization. Thank you, KFS, for another tremendous season. And thank you for sharing some of your winnings with us with your super chat. Really appreciate that. I hope you are a lot richer in shekels and in basketball enjoyment, because I just think this, as like you are, I am absolutely thrilled with this outcome. I have so much appreciation for how this team performs on a game in, game out basis. It has been an absolute honor to try to put into words, put into a video, put into tweets, posts, whatever, to try to like provide some sort of appreciation in the content game regarding this team, because they deserve all the praise right now. And we know they don't always get it from the national media, so it is up to us to really do it, because I think some are coming around, but you got, the TNT guys, they were not going to materialize, but they were going to pick the Pacers over the Knicks if that was going to be the matchup. I'm telling you, just prepare yourselves. There are going to be many that are going to pick either whoever comes out of the Heat 76er matchup against the Knicks. But we can relish in what was a fantastic regular season. And Chris, I am happy that you were able to reap some of those rewards. Really appreciate you hanging with us. Thank you so much. Busy. Thank you again. I really appreciate you being there. Dear Robert Cross, if the Knicks only get 53 wins, hashtag 53 wins this season, we will be showing up to your house with metal bats with love, KFS community. Yeah, we need to get more than 53 wins this season. 53 wins and only 53 wins, counting the playoffs, would be quite the disappointment. But we are not going to speak that into the world right now, because I think the Knicks will be favored, and they should be favored in either one of those matchups that we can get. The 76er piece of it is like, I've seen some of the Embiid games since he came back. He has not, to me, looked like the same guy. But he just, if he's on the court, you just have to worry about what he can do in a playoff series, despite some less than stellar playoff performances in a career that has been marred a little bit by some playoff disappointments. A lot of that, or some of that at least, has been injury related, and again, unfortunate for him that he's clearly not going to go into this postseason at full health, at full athletic ability. Like he's just not quite where he needs to be, but it doesn't mean he's not going to be an absolute problem for the Heat in that first play-in, and then potentially the Knicks if the 76ers win. So in any case, Busy, we are going for well over 53 wins this season. I think that is 53 wins would be a big disappointment. I am fully confident this team is going to figure out a way to get 4 in the first round, and then they should be favored in their next round matchup and potentially get to the Eastern Conference Finals, which sounds crazy to say, especially without Randall, but this is where this team is. You got to call it like you see it. Thank you, Busy. Juanon, thank you so much. You've been there for a while here, just hanging with us and supporting us. Thank you so much. Bucks and Cavs duck the smoke. Didn't play to win today. We did. We don't fear Philly, Miami, or Boston. They do. They should fear us too. Hashtag fire Tibbs. I don't know. What did the Bucks end up doing, Kevin? You might want to. Could you mind just putting like in the chat, just based a few words on how the Bucks managed their game? It wasn't locked in with that one either, but maybe they didn't play some of their guys or cut their minutes short in that game. And we know the Cavs ended up resting most of their players in the fourth quarter in their game against the Hornets. The Knicks did not do that. The Knicks would not do that. I have talked, not to beat a dead horse, but the Knicks were never going to cheat the game in that way. And we don't fear Philly, Miami, or Boston. They should fear us too. It's Philly, Miami, or Boston. I don't think the Knicks fear any of those teams. They're not going to fear the Bucks. They match up, especially how the Knicks play offense. They match up really well against the Bucks. The Knicks match up really well against a lot of teams with Jalen Brunson playing like this, but specifically how the Bucks go about their defense, it's just a problem for them without having anyone that can cut his water off a little bit and make things. They just don't have a challenge, a relevant challenge for Jalen Brunson against the Bucks when they play the Knicks. And Kev is putting in Dame only played 30 minutes. None of their starters played more than 31. Seems like they punted on the fourth quarter. So there you go. I know the game was, I don't know. I think the Magic had a lead in the fourth quarter. So maybe it's a completely reasonable decision by Doc to rest guys if you didn't think they had enough to turn that game around. But does it feel like the way this day turned out, that the Knicks did it their way, and you had these other teams that were doing it in a way that, you can argue there's benefits, there's drawbacks, but it played out probably exactly how I would have expected it to, in terms of like the Knicks were never going to let go of the rope. And these other teams are probably going to view, health and seeding and all that as just more important, or health being more important than trying to get a higher seed. I get it. But it is just not how I view the game. There was never a point where I was rooting for the Knicks to lose. I even in games or seasons where the Knicks were battling, quote unquote, for a top draft pick, I could never quite bring myself to root for them to lose. So most of those games I would just not watch because it was just torture to try to watch and be so conflicted, but then end up rooting for them in the end. And obviously it not panning out a lot of those times with late season wins and ruining draft pick status and all that. So, but I just have never been capable of rooting for the Knicks to lose. It's just not, I don't know how some can do that. They can look at it in a more, macro sense where they're looking bigger picture. And I'm not saying my way is right, their way is right or wrong, or my way is wrong. It's just not how I view sports. Every time I watch my team play, I want them to win the game. And I was always confident they were going to try to win this game. And I will say I am a little surprised. The Bulls, and to their credit, they pushed their guys too. They didn't cheat the game either, and they played very hard. There was a couple transition possessions in the early part of the game where it seemed like DeRozan just didn't have interest in defending in transition. I was wondering if he was going to be there for the entire game, or that was going to be a lower minute threshold for him, but it wasn't the case. And their guys just made a ton of shots, and Caruso was a problem on the defensive end, and Vucevic had a wonderful offensive game throughout most, and Knicks couldn't really handle him. So just a quick note on that. Benji has talked about, and this might only present itself when they get to the Celtics in terms of trying to figure out a way to guard some of the pick and pop action. But, Benji has been one to want the Knicks to do more veer switching, to where you, instead of hedging and Porzingis popping, and you have a open three or in drop and you have an open three, like have your guard take Porzingis and then have your big take whoever's the ball handler in that case. That's what they call like a veer switch when you're veer switching a pick and roll. They did that a couple of times to Vucevic, and there was at least one or two where Vuce had the mismatch and was able to take advantage of the post. So Porzingis, as we know, has been better in the post over the past couple of years. It's a nice, easy counter for them if teams are going to put their small on Porzingis, because he can now punish them. So you did see that in today's game, which I only wanted to mention because there is a potential here for a Boston Knicks Eastern Conference final, and that is something that is worth considering. But a lot of basketball to get to before we get to an Eastern Conference finals matchup. But I did make note of some of the way the Knicks regarding Vucevic and some of the problems he gave them. He played a really good offensive game, and again, credit to the Bulls for just playing a really strong game overall and just making a ton of shots. I felt like every time the Knicks late in the second half, like build some momentum, the Bulls would make a tough contested shot or make a corner three or get an offensive rebound. They played really well. So they are going to, I think they're going to beat the Hawks. I think they're just playing better and a tougher team. Juanon, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you, Kevin, for putting those notes in the chat. Appreciate that. Alex, Embiid's the ultimate foul hunter and Miami is the ultimate limb hunter. Well done. One way or another on Tibbs to ensure neither takes over a series. Let's go. Embiid, the foul stuff is something you can limit because that is something that is, I imagine, going to be a major talking point if the Knicks end up playing them, where you just have to keep your hands away from some of his rip throughs and his low pickups and try to, if he's going into his mid-range elbow jump shot, his hang dribble, you just have to contest and keep your hands away and hope he misses more than he makes. That is the Embiid factor there. You have to stay out of foul trouble. There's just no bigger impact on a game in terms of offensive players potentially in the NBA than Joel Embiid living at the free throw line. So that is if they end up playing the Knicks, that is going to be a major factor. And then Miami, listen, the way they play and some of the injuries that they caused last year, Adebayo, again, not a dirty play diving at Quickly's ankles for a loose ball, but it was a reckless play potentially or a dangerous play most mildly. So I think that the Heat have done things, have enough of a track record to have that reputation. And that is something that, Martin putting his foot under Brunson on his landing spots and in the playoffs last year was completely reckless. That to me, of all the dirty plays, I think that was actually some of those instances where you could see him shift his foot on Brunson's landing spot. And I don't think Brunson he got one flagrant on that in the postseason, but it was something that he was constantly aware of and complaining about and just felt like the referees were allowing Martin to do that almost unimpeded. And that to me is a dirty basketball play. The Jaquez getting underneath Julius and the Adebayo stuff, I'm less willing to call those dirty, but I do want to make note of, I hope the Knicks are preparing to send in a lot of moving screens or wide foot screens that Adebayo will set and get usually no, demerits for that, where his feet are outside his body. He's setting up a wide base screen or moving into a screen or giving an elbow. I'm hoping the Knicks are already setting the expectation with the league office that this stuff should be a priority for the officials if the Knicks do end up playing the Heat. But yeah, Tibbs is this will be a big series on either one of them. I think they're on the defensive end. I think they'll have solid game plans against either one. Embiid specifically, there just isn't a ton you can do again. That is the ultimate issue, right? It's he is such a problem as a scorer because he doesn't really have natural things you could just take away. So the only thing you can take away, and I'll argue with myself here, you can take away the foul stuff. So you can keep him off the free throw line. You can do your best. He'll get there some, but you can eliminate some of the reaching fouls and keep him off the line in that way. But if he's making contested mid-range shots, it opens up some of the drive game. And then you get the the two-man game with Maxey and Embiid. It's really tough to cover. They're going to present problems if the Knicks end up playing them, but I think either one, the Knicks will win either series, but it will be close. Thank you, Alex. All right, who's up next? CKF. I'd rather play Philly, not because I fear Miami, but because Bam has a tendency to coincidentally, quote unquote, injure players. Yeah, I mean, it's a reputation that I don't know. I'm curious to know if it's just a Knicks specific reputation amongst Knicks fans, Knicks observers, but to me, Bam Adebayo does have a legitimate I think there's a legitimate reason to call him a reckless player. Again, I said I think there's a difference between being reckless and being dirty. If you want to call him a dirty player and some of the things he does with, like, he had the play earlier this year, recently, where he kind of grabbed hold of someone's arm. I forget who it was, and kind of ripped out, try to like turn his body and really pinned his arm against his, to try to look like he tried to injure someone there. And some of the foul, offensive foul stuff and the illegal screens, and it's almost like too much for it to be, as CKF makes clear, for it to be a coincidence, right? So if for that reason, and the Martin stuff going underneath Brunson's landing spot, like, there is enough concern, enough of a history to where I think you have to at least be concerned about any potential injury that could prop up here in the first round that could disrupt whatever playoff potential you may have. So if you're CKF like that concerned about it, like, I can't argue against that. And I think there's real reason to believe that the Heat do things in a way that just coincidentally puts them in positions to injure their opponent. So a real concern to think about there. CKF, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. David Futternick, thank you so much for being here. You've been with us for a while, and you are one of our bigger supporters. So thank you so much. If I was having my bar mitzvah this year, it would be Jalen Brunson themed. How lucky we are to call ourselves Knicks fans. As Tony Soprano said, you got to savor it. It's important in life. Not done yet. Thank you, KFS fam. We are so lucky to have Jalen Brunson on this ball club. He changed the franchise the day he got here. As Tibbs talked about earlier today, when he got here, and he immediately went to work that summer and set the expectation of what was going to be expected. Despite some mocking from Josh Hart, like, it doesn't seem like Jalen Brunson is a vocal leader in a traditional sense, but he is the ultimate leader by example. His defense this year has been better than last year, in part because he is seems like he's playing harder on that end. It seems like he is putting his body on the line more often this year than last year. He is commanding such so much attention on the offensive end, and still, in my mind, playing competent defense, which I don't think was the case all of last year. I don't ever think he was a bad defender. I thought, there are some limitations with him, size and speed, and they're just going to limit his overall ceiling as a defender. But his defense has gotten better this year, along with his offense, and he just sets a tone of respect and effort that trickles down in a way that can't be understated, because it is, and granted, they have guys on this roster that would play this way if they weren't on the Knicks. I think Josh Hart he plays how he plays, and I think DiVincenzo too. But there is a level of, we are not going to give an inch here, that starts with the head coach, that is filtered down to their best player, and is just consumed by the rest of the pieces on this ball club. And the ultimate sort of like how that manifests itself is like today, where they had every reason to maybe not give it 100%, and maybe like let go of the gas a little bit and just try to like coast a little bit. And they had every reason to do it. And the coach had every reason to say, you know what, we are not going to push this right now. We have 3 seed as our floor. That's good enough. We don't need 49 wins is good enough. Like, good enough is not good enough. So that is the mantra that the coach and the superstar have. And that is something that is completely, that really falls down to all the other players. And they have guys on here that are accustomed to playing hard and playing with a respect of the game. So it is part of the guys on this roster aren't going to cheat the game, but believe me, it starts with the coach and it starts with the best player. And as David says here at the end of this super chat, you got to savor it. I think savoring 50 wins and the number 2 seed is a very, very important part of what we're doing here right now on this post game show, because I think there's easy for me to automatically like look ahead, like, all right, and I've done it a little bit here. How are we going to defend Embiid? How the Heat going to defend Brunson, and how do we counter that and all that? It is important just to sit with 50 wins and the number 2 seed for a bit and just appreciate it, because it's only happened 14 times in this franchise's long history. So it doesn't happen that often. But as I said, it feels like hours ago now. But as I said earlier, there is an expectation now for me that this team, this front office, and this coach, the superstar, and the pieces they have around them, they can be set up to where 50 wins is the expectation every year for the foreseeable future, which is what it was in the 1990s when 50 wins was a given, a floor, and winning playoff rounds was a given. That's where I think this team is. This is the start of it. This is the start of it. Thank you, David. And thank you. Dom Cappuccini, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys sticking with us here on this Sunday. I don't know what the weather is like up north, but it is a beautiful day outside here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. But I am not regretting being inside in this dark office. I am appreciating every second of this. So thank you so much for all you guys and gals joining with me. Just stopping by to say how proud I am of these guys in so many ways. After the SAL, what is loss, early in-season tournament, maybe? I figured the 2 seed dreams were gone. Precious, thanks for giving it all when we needed it most all year. Let's go Knicks. Come on, all takers. Yeah, I mentioned Precious earlier. I think he is easy. It's easy for us to get lost in. It's easy for us to forget what he did for us, for this team, with that stretch of games where they just didn't have live bodies to play, and they needed him to play 35 plus minutes, almost. After that first stretch of games when he got here, and we didn't play much, and we were worried about, like, all right, is he a Tibbs guy? Like, how are they going to figure out how to get him into a nice role here with this Knicks team after the trade? But Tibbs ended up going to him and riding him to the point where it was, like I said, almost 40 minutes a night for a decent stretch of basketball there. And he defended well. He rebounded well. There are some significant challenges as a offense when he is your power forward. I get it. But there are just times in a season, in a long 82-game season, where you just have to string together competency. And that is not easy to do. Just look at the NBA right now. There are teams that can't string together competency for stretches when they have injuries. And because of Precious Achiuwa, the Knicks went a stretch of games where they were able to string together competency despite massive injury issues. I don't know what this means about him going forward. He's a free agent. The Knicks, there's cap machinations and issues there that are going to have to be worked out. But he has proven to me that he is a NBA rotation player. Here's the stretch of games. I'm just going to list the minutes. So starting January 30th, so that's the second game after the Randall and Anunoby injuries, 40 minutes and 43 minutes and 42 minutes and 40 minutes, 41 minutes, 43 minutes, 38 minutes, 43 minutes, 38 minutes, 34. And then the minutes start to trail off after that. But a stretch of games where he damn near averages 40 minutes a night. And the Knicks didn't perform great in those games. I get it. There was spacing issues and offensive issues, but he averaged 40 minutes for a 12-game stretch of basketball. And the Knicks won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those games. So if you win 3 of them, you win 4 of them, you're not the 2 seed. You don't have 50 wins. So credit to Precious Achiuwa for being there for this team, because there is a level of competency that the Knicks needed to get to, and they needed to figure out a way to get live bodies in there that can just eat up innings. And he did that for this Knicks team, and it shouldn't be lost on anyone. Come on, all takers. Yeah, I mean, said it before, say it again. Knicks should not be afraid of any of these teams. I mean, let's be real. They've beaten good teams all year. They've beaten the Celtics. They've beaten the Bucks. They've beaten the Heat. They should beat, Boston's a different animal. We get it. But beyond Boston, on the Knicks side of the bracket, they should be favored. In the first round, they favored, as I think about it, in the Bucks series in the second round. That's up for debate. Obviously, we don't know what the status of Giannis is going to be. But yeah, proud of this team. Dom, you are proud of this team. I think we should all be very proud of this team. I mean, I think that's the perseverance, pride. Those are big takeaways for me for this regular season. Thank you, Dom. Alex, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you hooking up with us. Also, bad look for the league that teams tank their way out of certain seeding today. Why not let top 4 teams in each conference choose opponents? That has been something that some have talked about before. I think Zach Lowe's broached that as like a potential option, maybe as like as a top seed, you get to choose your opponent out of the play-in. I don't know. I don't mind the way it turned out. I don't love the choosing your opponent thing on a personal level. I think it does add some drama potentially to some first round playoffs. Obviously, if you're picking a team and you end up getting the team you didn't pick, there's going to be obviously some built-in drama for that. So I get it from that perspective. It does create some theater, but in terms of teams tanking their way out of seeding today, I think it's an issue that to me doesn't rise to the level of it being a legitimate problem. I think we're going to move past it today, and we are going to quickly move into play-in round discussions and potential discussions on who the Knicks are going to play in the first round. Do I like the fact that the Cavs ended up resting their guys and the Bucks didn't push their guys beyond their 30 minutes and that they seem to have punted the fourth quarter? It's not a good look for the league, but I don't think you can legislate your way out of it. I think it's just part of the deal. Coaches should have some control over the health and the maintenance of their players. You already have some things built into the system this year that's limited some of the missed games. So you have that as a thing the league has done, which I think has been as a whole been a good thing. I think they have to tweak some of the award stuff, but as a whole, I think the games played threshold has been a net positive. But if teams are going to decide that they're not going to run through the finish line in a game that is going to potentially have some impact on the seeding, and they're rather have a guarantee health for their star players, like that's their prerogative. I am more inclined to make the juxtaposition between what the Cavs did, what the Bucks did, and what the Knicks did, because I think it speaks loudly to how each of these teams view the game and how much they take their cue from their head coaches. Thank you, Alex. Andrew P., thank you again. Can you see bogey for Hart? Can you see bogey for Hart card played? Would you? Well, in terms of starting, no. I think Hart is, to me, very important as a playmaker when they put 2 on the ball. I do think the Knicks miss some of the energy off the bench that Hart brings, but I think the starting lineup is so good that you just do not want to mess with it. And I think that, to Hart's credit, as a guy that is going to struggle shooting the ball and as a scorer, brings enough value as a playmaker off the Brunson gravity and as a transition player that he's still bringing value as an offensive player. And the defense is just an important part of this, because you have Anunoby, you have iHart. You need like another guy, especially if Anunoby's guarding your best player and he's going to play a Heat matchup and he's locked on Jimmy Butler. and the Knicks get in rotation, you want Josh Hart on the back line if Anunoby is going to not be able to play that role as a low man because he's now guarding Jimmy Butler. I think in many ways you like Anunoby as a 6'7" with a 7'2", 7'1" wingspan playing your backline defense because he's basically like a rim protector center with his length. Like he can really make some plays above the rim as a defensive player protecting the basket. But Hart is very good in his rotations. He really, I think, personally, is like the glue that brings this defense together. He's not the best defender on the team. That goes to Anunoby, goes to iHeart, but he is a integral part of their defense, and he's gotten so good as a short roll playmaker, as a guy that can make plays in space, finishing for himself, or just keeping the ball moving, swinging it to DiVincenzo at a couple as because you set that ball screen with a Hart, they send two. Hart is going to be, with iHeart and Brunson. So Hart is going to be your outlet. So if that pass usually to Brunson's left gets made, the team is in rotation. He can make that quick swing, and he's so good at making a quick decision on it to DiVincenzo to try to generate a corner or a wide open three above the break. So he's a really important glue guy for both on the defense and on the offense. So I wouldn't make that change. I think you need Bogey's offense in the second unit. And I think like today where he hit big shots in the fourth quarter, that they'll need him to have stretches like that in the playoffs. And I think he's up to the task. Thank you, Andrew P. Andrew Claudio, what's going on? Oh, look at this guy. He's supporting his group. He is this guy. I mean, I can't say enough about Andrew Claudio. I think most of you know he is the one speaking of glue, speaking of setting the tone, like this operation, it's an operation. I know I have enough insight into what Andrew Claudio does to get this operation flowing. It is a major situation that he has helped build and continues to help make run. So and I am just a small piece of it. Andrew Claudio deserves a lot of credit for bringing you the content that all the post-game shows, all the pre-game shows that he does, all the late nights, the early mornings, all the editing and the producing. Just fantastic guy, and he makes this whole thing run, and we appreciate him. Checking in to tell you that you rule, the KFS faithful, that we love you guys too, and this effing team, that they have won our hearts forever. Here. Looking forward to the playoffs. Get the party bus ready, Robert. Hashtag 50 wins. Hashtag why not now. Head to the KFS merch store for the why not now paraphernalia, hoodies, sweaters, t-shirts, many different colors. I have mine in the mail, I think. I think I got the black, t-shirt. Looking forward to rocking that on one of these KFS shows in the future. I think it's a great motto, because if you think about, it's always been this year as a stepping stone to the next iteration of this team. But why not now? Number 2 seed. As I said earlier, if you were the number 2 seed in a conference, you should be considered a live threat to get to the finals. Yes, Boston is a juggernaut, but this is what you have earned by getting to 50 wins and getting to the number 2 seed. And I have echoed it, and I want to echo it again. This team has won our hearts. It's a rare occurrence to get a team that performs every night with this level of effort. And I mean every night. It's every night. Teams play hard. It's the NBA. I think it's usually like an overrated narrative that the NBA players don't play hard. But it's with the Knicks, it's just a different level of hard. It's a physical hard. It is we're going to hit you over the head with metal bats for 48 minutes hard. It stands out too because of where the league has gone in terms of the offense. And I know that has been reined in a little bit as the season has moved along. But the Knicks stand out in a way that is unique and that really just speaks to where this team is as a how they want to perform on a day in day out basis. But I don't want it to necessarily lose sight of the fact that there is not real talent and real skill on this offense, because that to me is, as I try to contextualize where this team is. And I started with the evolution offensively and where they where they are, and the changes. They have a really talented group of offensive players that are playing in great flow right now. And flow is a big deal because that has not been a hallmark of the Tibbs era offensively. Even when it's good, it was not always the prettiest. And it doesn't have to be pretty to win, but there's like when you see the Knicks playing like a 5-out and the ball is humming and they're cutting and they're playing through Hartenstein and they're screening away actions and there's all this flow happening, that a lot of it is not play calls. This is just them playing and triggering actions based on where they are on the floor and reading the floor and trusting the pass and all that. That is a different level of offense that the Knicks have figured out a way to get to, and drastically different than where they were last year. So that is why when they go into the playoffs this year, I am not going to have as many questions about their offense, because I think there's more counters. I think they have more optionality. I think their players are better. And I think they have balance wise, obviously you've lost Randall, but I think the ancillary pieces around Brunson, they're just better than they were last year. And I think with the Brunson elevation to MVP caliber, obviously changes the mix in terms of what they can get to on the offensive end now, and how many challenges he presents, because there just isn't any good options for him. And teams know it. They will vary coverages up. They will try to figure out ways. They're going to bump him around and try to be physical with him. They're going to make him guard on the defensive end. But the Knicks have more ways to counter that this year. And I think that is going to lend to better offense in the playoffs, and I think better outcomes. But thank you, Andrew. And we always appreciate what you do for KFS. Thank you. Busy. We love you, DJ. We love you. I love you too. Thank you. But kind of odd and sucky for JMAC and Macri to skip out on us in the regular season finale, or finally be sure to scold your colleagues when you're done. Tibbs culture, no days off. Listen, there's family obligations. It's it's Sunday. They've been grinding it out since October. So I am not I appreciate the opportunity, of course, to do it. I get that they are not necessarily adhering to Tibbs culture, no days off, but I know you're being tongue in cheek busy, but I will just say that the amount of effort and time that goes into putting these post-game shows together, and Macri does the vast majority of them, and the pregame and the shows during the week, it just takes a lot of effort. It really does. So happy to step in and try to fill some significant shoes here as we wrap up the regular season. Kev, was that the last one, or is there one more after that? Busy, thank you so much. All right, that was it. This was fun. I appreciate I really appreciate and the time to be able to enjoy this final regular season game. And it was fitting that they got the 50, and fitting they got the number 2 seed. I was wondering, how I was going to contextualize the ending to this season if they lost the game to the Bulls and they fell down to 3 and they only got the 49 wins. So it was going to be like an awkward post-game show. So on a just a personal level, it felt good to be able to get to 50 wins and just appreciate the number 2 seed. Just an awesome job by this team in a game that they didn't have their A game. Turnovers were just obscene, and some of the decision-making not ideal, but they were able to, like they have done all year, grind to the last moment and figure out a way to win the game. And that to me is, you've talked a lot about hallmarks and sort of culture so much in this post-game show, and that just never giving an inch and just figuring out a way to win the game. That's the culture that this team, this coach, this front office has completely done, game in, game out. And the playoffs are now upon us, and we can enjoy the play-in. We will see who comes out of the 7-8 Sixers and the Heat matchup. In either case, we expect the Knicks to win because that's they're good enough to feel that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Kevin, for pushing the ones and twos and keeping me honest on some of the information around the NBA with the Bucks and the Cavaliers and all that. And really appreciate you throwing up the super chats and everyone that was able to support us today. We really appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel. Always content on the shorts or the long form on KFS YouTube channel. So make sure you hit that notification button too, so you're alerted on when new content is dropping. There will be, I believe, an X's and O's show with yours truly and Benji and Macri later this week. Once we know our opponent and we can really sink our teeth into the first round matchup. Well, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on all your favorite platforms. Those go a long way in helping us out, get the word out. And give me a follow, DJ Ace NBA on X, Twitter. All my stuff is on there. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us on this Sunday. Go Knicks. Later.